p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Annual rail fares increase across England and Wales, leaving thousands of passengers out of pocket.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Sunday, the 5th of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. Here are your top stories this morning.
Well, rail passengers in England and Wales are facing the largest hike in fares for more than a decade. The government says the rise of nearly 6% is below the rate of inflation and that it didn't want to add pressures on households. What do you think?
The Prime Minister has reiterated his plans to clamp down on the arrival of illegal migrants. Rishi Sunak told the Mail on Sunday, if you come here illegally, you will not be able to stay, with new laws reportedly being proposed in the next week.
And Prince Harry has opened up about losing his mum and starting therapy during a promotional Q&A for his memoir. The Duke of Sussex also questioned about his use of cocaine and marijuana by the controversial host Gabor Mate.
Well, as ever, you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Now, from today, if you're in England and Wales, you're going to have to pay more for your train tickets as the government introduces the biggest annual price hike in more than a decade.
Yes, tickets, including season and off-peak, will increase 5.9% from today.
Well, the government's defended the rise, saying, well, it isn't in line with inflation, adding they don't want to add pressures on households. Let's get more from our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis.
Please stand well clear of the edge of platform 3.
Rail fares are heading in one direction, up. A 5.9% increase awaits passengers buying tickets from today. It's the biggest rise in a decade. At a time when purses are being squeezed to pulp, it's a hard reality to swallow.
You kind of reconsider using an alternative such as like a bus or, like other different transport than getting on the train.
It does put me off a bit. I'd probably, since the existing price rises over the last 3 or 4 years, have already done that anyway.
Every single year it's gone up, and this is the biggest increase, but now I think it's gone too far. It's getting too high.
The Department for Transport sets fares for a number of regulated tickets, including season and off-peak. A season ticket from Nottingham to London for 5 days costs over £10,000 a year. But from today, that ticket will rise by more than £600. Usually, fares go up by July's retail prices index measure of inflation. Last year, it was 12.3%. The government says it's shielding passengers from the brunt of the costs by keeping the rise closer to 6%. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman said, "I understand it has been a difficult year and people are feeling the pinch, which is why, through the biggest ever government intervention, we capped the rise well below inflation and delayed it coming into force." It's been a rough time on the railways. From strikes to the pandemic, subsidies have kept trains running to the tune of £31 billion.
Well, no one likes prices going up for anything, and it's certainly no different when it comes to rail fares.
Mike Hewitson is head of policy at Transport Focus. The independent watchdog says passenger confidence is suffering.
It's hard for people to accept having to pay more if they're not getting more in return. Paying more for an unreliable service isn't good. So I think the important thing for the railways, if passengers are going to have to pay more, that they get a better service in return. And by that, I mean a service they can depend on.
While the fare cap only applies to some tickets, rail operators tend to follow the trend. When all prices seem high, hiding is wiser than standing out for the wrong reason. Will Hollis, GB News in Nottingham.
Well, our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson has spoken to people in Birmingham about the fare increase. This is what they had to say.
There's not enough trains, they don't run on time, and then they're putting the prices up. There's nothing to justify putting the prices up for the actual customers.
It's just another addition to the costs that are being piled on top of everybody. I come in by train every day, so it will be a real measurable increase in my costs, and it's one I can't avoid if I want to keep my job.
If we want the trains to run back to normal, go back to normal, and we have to give the train drivers and the staff a higher salary, which they need and want, then I don't mind.
Everyone's wanting a pay rise, everybody's wanting something for nothing. There's just not enough money to go around. Inflation's going to come down, so they should look at it in a bit more of a long term.
I've only just found out, and I get the train quite a lot, and due to obviously constant rise of price of living, I think it's a bit of a joke in all fairness, because people constantly have to pay to get to work and stuff like that, and there should be cheaper options, cheaper alternatives.
Let's talk to travel expert Simon Calder. Morning, Simon. I think you're down at Paddington Station, aren't you, this morning? I mean, this is a big blow, isn't it, for the travelling public?
Well, it is, Stephen, and good morning to you and your lovely viewers. But unfortunately, the rail finances are in a right old mess. And as a result, well, the passengers are going to be paying more, which a lot of people who never go near a train and yet who are paying billions of pounds, as we've just heard, to keep the trains running, are going to be in a position where they're going to have to pay yet more in taxes. And so the government says it's trying to kind of tread a fine line between protecting rail passengers, who of course are subject to all the cost of living price problems anyway, and the taxpayer, who really doesn't want to pay more for what frankly is quite a lousy service. We heard last week, for example, that that the number of cancellations on the day is at the highest it's ever been since records began. So people are quite frankly thinking, yep, it's we're paying more and we're getting less.
So, Simon, can you give us a snapshot of what these fare increases will look like? How much more will people be paying?
Well, as that excellent report said, this is only regulated fares, and that's most season tickets, it's longer off-peak return journeys, and it's peak fares around the big cities. And if you look at the sorts of increases we're seeing, Woking to London key commuter route, £216 more. Gloucester to Birmingham, £272. Brighton to London, £313. That's getting close to £1 a day extra, and that's not even counting weekends. Whitehaven to Carlisle, 127, and then if you're going from Neath to Cardiff, 113. Note that none of these are in Scotland, where they are keeping fares frozen until at least the end of March, and then furthermore they're going to have an experiment whereby they get rid of peak fares completely for 6 months, and hopefully they will get more travellers and more money, and that's the sort of thing that we need to do. But my favourite incredibly expensive ticket is the one from Swindon to Didcot Parkway on the Great Western Route from here to Bristol. It's only 14 minutes of travel. Fair enough, it goes at a fair old whack and covers 24 miles, but that has now gone up to almost £30. Just 30 pence short of £30 for a one-stop 14-minute rail trip.
I mean, the problem, you say what's happening in Scotland, you know, and the idea of getting rid of peak travel, trying to get more people on the tracks. I mean, this is the problem facing the industry, isn't it? You know, they're running out of money, they've got problems with the staff, the service is terrible, partly because of the huge strikes going on, but partly because it's been pretty bad anyway. People are just going to avoid getting on the train, aren't they?
And that's exactly right. A spiral of decline is what everybody, including me, because I don't have a car, I absolutely rely on trains. And thanks everybody, all you happy taxpayers, for the subsidies that you're providing me and many other people. But yes, once people start deciding, well, the price is simply too high, once they find alternative ways of travelling, or crucially, people who are lucky enough in their working lives not to need to commute every day, the revenue for the railway falls away. Yes, the strikes are dragging on, and we are going to see yet more industrial action from the 16th of March onwards. Members of the RMT union who say, we want a no-strings pay rise, and the government saying, you've had your best and final offer, you're not getting any more, and if you want to go on strike, well, that of course is your right, but it's not going to do you any good. So once again, we're going into the another round of strikes, taking us all the way up to April Fool's Day, and indeed many passengers will be feeling increasingly foolish if they rely on the railways. It's an absolute mess. Of course, the Labour Party says, no, you've got to reduce fares, you've got to encourage people back on the railways, but frankly, I imagine that the shadow ministers are very glad that they're not having to sort out the many problems on the railways.
Yes, Simon, this is just going to rumble on, isn't it? What advice would you give people watching and listening, people that do have to get the train? How can they continue to save?
Well, there's loads and loads of ways, fortunately. And if you get a rail card, and that will, you can get a rail card based on your age. If you're under 31 or over 59, which is great. And indeed, even between then, if you're travelling regularly with somebody, might be a partner, might be a work colleague, you get the two together rail card. You can also get a family and friends rail card. It's not so much going to help the commuters, but there's very simple ticket splitting deals. So, for instance, tomorrow morning, you want to go to Bristol on the train from here in Paddington. Well, you would be mad to go to the ticket desk and say, can I have a ticket to Bristol? Because what you want is a ticket as far as Didcot and then a ticket from there to Bristol. That's going to save you about 40% on the journey for no effort. It's perfectly legal. The trains all stop, as far as I know, at Didcot. So ticket splitting is the way through. You're just exploiting the mad fares system that has kind of grown up since privatisation. And the more people who do that, the more the rail industry is going to actually have to confront the fact that they need proper fares reform. And actually, it's a government decision. And I hope this will move the government a bit closer. And if you had more rational, more reasonable fares, I think you would see more people travelling by train, especially if you could rely on them.
Well, exactly so. Simon, happy travelling today. Good to see you.
It's not good, is it?
It's not good. We'd love to hear from you, whether you're worried about how you're going to pay the extra, whether you're going to avoid going on the train as a result. Do you have any faith in getting on the train anymore? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Do you side with the government in saying, well, look, they need a lot of money. It takes some of the pressure off the taxpayer through all of this a little bit? Or do you just think perhaps actually the Scottish government's got it right? Keep the fares frozen, make it cheaper actually in peak time, you just get more people on and more revenue.
Because some of these numbers, I mean, look at these. I mean, Brighton to London, you're looking at almost £6,000 a year now for a season ticket, Brighton to London, which is the commuter line. I mean, those people need to get to work. And the cost of living crisis, £6,000 is an awful lot of money. Yeah, let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
It is 13 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today.
And the Duke of Sussex has defended his use of recreational drugs, saying some of them helped him mentally. In his memoir, Spare, Harry admitted to regular drug taking, saying he used marijuana in 2015 whilst living in the grounds of Kensington Palace. Yesterday, he spoke to trauma expert Dr. Gaber Mate, who diagnosed him with attention deficit disorder.
More than 100 nations have completed a historic pact to protect the world's oceans. It's a legally binding high seas treaty. It aims to put 30% of seas into protected areas by 2030. Environmental groups say the agreement will help reverse marine losses and ensure sustainable development.
Venues across England and Wales will be open later over the King's coronation weekend in May. Pubs, clubs and bars will serve customers for an extra 2 hours between the 5th and the 7th of May. The Home Secretary says it's so people can have time to enjoy an extra pint or two.
So you'll enjoy that, won't you?
Yeah,
Extra few pints over coronation weekend.
I'll be very happy about that. That's the best news I've seen all day.
Well, except the reality is we'll be working, won't we?
Yeah, that's true. We'll probably be here, won't we? Actually, no, they might put that on the road.
It'll be on the road. I think we'll be on the road somewhere. Yeah. I don't know what the I don't know what the plans are. I don't know what the bosses are planning with all that. And it's one of those things. In some respects, I always think, well, it'd be nice just to sit back and watch it.
Yeah.
But actually, it's a privilege to work it.
Right, yeah.
Though you don't see as much when you're working it, but to, you know, it's to be able to help report on something like that.
Well, it's part of history, isn't it?
It's part of history.
Front row seat. That's the way that I see it, and definitely with the late Queen's passing. I mean, it was just so sad and so tragic, but it was also such a privilege to be there and be able to speak to people and see it firsthand. I mean, we spent a lot of time in Windsor, didn't we?
Yeah.
After that.
Yeah, we did.
And it will be nice to see the other side of that, the happiness and the joy of those kind of events.
Yeah, it will be, actually. It will be.
I'm looking forward to it. And the street parties.
But you can still stay out late and have a few extra beers.
Oh, you know I will.
We'll carry you through in the morning. It'll be all right.
Well.
Don't you worry. Now, the Prime Minister has vowed to clamp down on migrants claiming asylum in the UK who arrive via small boats.
Yes, Rishi Sunak has made stopping small boats one of his 5 priorities for 2023, with reports suggesting new laws will soon be introduced to combat them.
Now, currently, people who come on the small boats have right to remain in the country to have their case heard. But could that be set to change?
Well, joining us now is political commentator Lettice Bromovsky, who's sat in the studio with us now. Good morning.
Good morning, babe.
So, big splash on the Mail today. Rishi, make no mistake, I'll deport Channel migrants, and it's set to introduce laws we're hearing this week. Tell us a bit more about this.
Exactly. So this has just come out, and it's a new legislation they're proposing, hopefully on Tuesday is the plan, to essentially make asylum claims inadmissible if you are coming over here on a small boat crossing the channel, and also give the government powers to then deport you to Rwanda or another safe third world country, is what they've said. And really, I guess this is clearly another step in Rishi's plan in the lead up to the general election to win back voters. This is a very important topic for voters. It's very popular, and really it's something that resonates with a lot of voters at the moment. So last year we had 45,000 people come across the channel, and this year alone we've already had 3,000. This is a serious issue in this country, and people need it to be handled.
Yeah, the problem with all of this, though, is he's making, as far as a lot of the voters are concerned, he's making the right noises.
Yeah.
You know, if you come here in a small boat, you know, you cannot claim to stay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Legally, he may not be able to do what he can fulfil his promise and he can put the legislation through, get it through Parliament, but it doesn't mean it's going to go through the courts.
Well, exactly. And this is the opposition and the struggle that he is very much going to come up against. How is he going to get this through without breaching the UN Refugee Convention, coming up against the European Court of Human Rights, the Human Rights Act? We've already seen before with the Rwanda plan the huge issues and opposition from human rights groups that the government came into, and essentially that made the Rwanda plan fail, as we saw those original 130 migrants who were meant to be on that plane slowly, one by one, essentially taken off until that plane did not take off at all. So really what we're seeing is the government now just setting themselves up for failure. He's going in with a very hard line in an attempt to deter these boats, deter these gangs and these people who are being exploited. But really, is it just going to fail in the end?
When you see these headlines, don't you? I mean, I read this morning and I said, well, that's not going to happen because with Rwanda, not yet one person's been actually on a flight and which managed to take off. So, I mean, it does make you feel as though these things just won't get through the courts. It then asks the question, doesn't it, really, why Rishi Sunak made it one of those 5 key promises, I will stop the boats, because it seems like an impossible task. Currently, nothing has worked. It's been something that's plagued the government for the last 4 years, but nothing so far has managed to deter people from getting on those small boats. It seems like, he's set himself up for failure.
No, exactly. And the worst thing that we're seeing come out of this is the danger people are willing to put themselves in. It was just over a year ago that we had that awful accident where 31 migrants who were crossing the Channel capsized and they all drowned. And actually, even just this week, this isn't just UK issue, but migrants in Italy, 59 of them are now said to have died in a boat that capsized crossing from Turkey. We don't want people to be risking their lives for this, and it really needs to stop with the gangs. That's the main thing.
I tell you what's interesting, though, with all of this, because everything is part of the political game, whether we like it or not. He's going to struggle to get this through. It's not impossible, but he's going to struggle. What it does do, if it proves to be very, very popular with the public, it puts Labour in a difficult position, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And if it proves to be very, very popular, it shows that Rishi is willing to take those steps. If it says, the public comes out and they're very supportive of it, it'll give the government more backing. It might give them a bit of a boost in the polls. And this is really what they're looking for. Yes, he wants to change this, but there is a lot of this that it doesn't explain either. For example, it hasn't said anything about what they're going to do with the backlog of 166 migrants we currently have in this country. It is only talking with forward-looking. So really, there's a lot of other issues that aren't going to be solved or explained with this legislation.
Should we look at something different now? And the Privileges Committee, their interim report into Boris Johnson and whether he misled Parliament. How serious is this looking, do you think, for Boris Johnson?
So I think it's looking much more serious. The Privileges Committee have come out and said that they have strong evidence that he has misled Parliament on 4 separate occasions. We've seen recently more of these images come out which show Boris in meeting rooms in Downing Street, and there's food and drink and wine in some cases on these tables, making these gatherings look not like the business meetings that supposedly they were, but more social gatherings, which at that time were banned. So if he is found to have held Parliament in contempt of Parliament, then he will be forced to potentially have a by-election because he could be suspended for a period of longer than 10 days. And if the Commons agrees, then he could be forced to have a by-election. So he is currently fighting for his seat in many ways. Obviously, there are many steps in order to get to that stage. But, this is the reality of the situation.
Meanwhile, we've got to touch on the latest Matt Hancock WhatsApp messages. He wanted to... There was talk about when a new variant came out. This is the latest splash in the lockdown files in the Sunday Telegraph, frightening the pants off the public. I mean, but look, it's a turn of phrase. There was real concern. I don't know which variant it was. But
Kent variant.
It was the Kent one. So there was a lot of genuine concern. So it's...
Yeah.
The language doesn't sound great, but it wasn't meant for public consumption.
Well, it wasn't meant for public consumption, but it is the language. It is the casual use of it. It is the sort of, let's do this, the sort of trying to manipulate it. I also think what the Telegraph have done, they've sort of juxtaposed this piece next to Isabel Oakeshott's piece, just below it on the front page, which talks about a 15-year-old boy who actually ended up taking his own life in the pandemic because he was so scared of everything that was going on. And yet you have our politicians here talking so casually about things that just weren't that casual. And it sort of shows the leadership that we had at that time, and it's all just quite disappointing to see.
And it is worth remembering at the time that we just didn't know what we were facing, right?
Yeah.
Many people were genuinely scared.
No,
That's
absolutely.
A lot of people remember that very vividly.
And people still do. Even now you see people travelling on the train. Some people will not take off their masks anymore. They will wear them permanently because they think that that's what's keeping them safe, and they still have that fear around what happened. It was an incredibly serious time for us, and these WhatsApp messages are, I think, quite harrowing for a lot of people to read, to see how they were being interpreted in the highest levels of government.
OK. Lettice, thanks very much indeed. Your thoughts on all of that, please. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Maybe I'm just too much of a... I don't know. I mean, but look, in this business, we all talk about things... on WhatsApp or just general conversations, and because because you work in the business of a lot of serious stories, it's a bit like nurses in A&E. You know for well, nurses in A&E and any hospital department are often quite jokey, and even when they're having to deal with a dead person, a corpse, whatever, because it's the only way they keep going. That gallows humour, and you get that in newsrooms a lot. I would imagine you get it a lot in the army, you get it a lot in government and things. And I just wonder if that's what this is. And it's not that there's humour about all of this particularly, but they're just talking about it in a way which is a lot more practical and normal than you sort of think, well, they should be dealing with such seriousness.
Yeah.
But
But
really? Would we?
Well, we've also got to bear in mind that these are conversations on WhatsApp, aren't they? And the way that you'd speak on WhatsApp is not the way that you would speak on a broadcast.
No. So I don't know.
It does need to be read in context.
To me, it's a storm in a teacup, but I seem to be the only person in the country thinking that at the minute.
But like Lettice was saying, there was genuine fear, and we heard there about people that took their own lives from the fear that they felt. So, for many people to read that Hancock had a plan to fly into the pants of the public, that's painful for lots of people. So let us know what you think of that. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
We've got much more to come for you, including the latest offerings from Prince Harry.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh, welcome back. Hello, good evening. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Still to come for you this morning.
Freezing Arctic air could bring the coldest day of the year for some parts of the UK. We'll be speaking with a weather expert at 7:10 to find out if you'll be affected.
A police force Police horse. No, a police force is on the hunt for new recruits. It could all go so terribly wrong. But we'll tell you what they're after. But you can probably tell if you're watching on the TV because we were showing you lots of pictures of dogs. Sort of gives the game away.
Let us know what you're up to
Maybe
today.
horses as well.
And maybe horses as well. Very, very, very cute dogs there.
Should we just go home?
We're struggling a bit this morning, aren't we?
My voice is going, the whole thing,
no.
it's just falling apart.
It's water in here. Anyway, let us know what you're up to today. If you've got any nice plans, let us know. GBNews at gbnews.uk.
Now, this is just what you want to hear this morning. Prince Harry has opened... No, don't tune out. Has just opened up about his past, his relationships, and all the battles with cancer and all the rest of it, his inner trauma, all that sort of thing. He's been waffling on again.
Yep, lots of content last night. The Duke of Sussex hosted a paid-for Q&A event with trauma expert Dr. Gabor Mate. Gabor. Is that a Spanish name? Gabor.
Sort of thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he discussed how he felt different from his family, describing his upbringing as coming from a broken home.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's hardly unique in that, is he? He also talked about his time in Afghanistan, saying some British soldiers were not necessarily supportive of military efforts.
Well, joining us now to unpack it all is royal biographer Nigel Cawthorne. Good morning to you, Nigel. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme. So if our viewers and listeners didn't catch the Q&A last night, what did they miss? What revelations were made by the Duke of Sussex?
Well, really, I mean, I don't know how unpopular Harry wants to be. We've had it all in the Netflix series. We've had this massive biography. We don't need to know anymore. He's just want to unburden himself unnecessarily. As you say, that he's not the only person from a broken family. Is very unhappy for him that his mother died when he was so young in such a terrible way. But other people get through these things and are not going on about it years later.
Yeah, I mean, it's very odd, isn't it? I mean, the point is, this was meant to be about healing, and what it seems pretty clear is that he's not someone who really has healed at the moment.
No, he doesn't. He just seems to revel in it almost, and likes to pick at the scab and open the scar again.
I found it quite interesting. Gabor Mate said he diagnosed him with attention deficit disorder after reading the book Spare. What's your take on what's going on in Harry's mind when you read the book and when you watched the Q&A last night?
Well, he's hardly getting a deficit of attention, is he? He's getting more attention than anyone in the world. Will this be enough for him? We don't need to hear any more from him ever, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but the problem is we are going to hear it, and when he talks, there's coverage, Nigel.
Well, yes, indeed. I don't know how much more he could wring out of this. He does say that he has got another 400 pages that were cut from the original manuscript of Spare. Maybe he's going to inflict that on us as well.
OK, Nigel, good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Appreciate it. It is just, well, do you know what? I'm exasperated.
You're speechless, aren't you?
I am almost lost for words just because... Just stop, Harry. Just stop. I mean, I know he's under pressures now. He's under pressures from the publishers, and this was all organised by Penguin Random House or whoever it is who published his book. But...
Yeah, financial pressures as well. I mean, he's going to keep making money, so, I mean, he is going to keep talking, isn't he?
How much does he need? They've got about 60 million quid in the bank now.
Have you seen the house?
No.
Palatial.
Yeah, well, there you go.
That's going to cost a few bob, isn't it?
Talking of money, you've been in touch over the rail fare increases. Morning to you. Mike says, I'm a 74-year-old pensioner. I most certainly cannot afford train fares now. With the increase, it is totally out of my price range.
Brad in Richmond says, I've had to get an Uber to Royal Berkshire Hospital from Heathrow to get treatment because the train wasn't running again this weekend. In a developed country, we should not be having this problem. I can relate to that. I had to get an Uber.
To Brighton?
£40, yeah. I had to get an Uber to Brighton. And then on the way back, the trains weren't running, obviously. And I had to get a £40 Uber on the way back as well, because can't get a train. I relate to that issue, Brad.
Keith in Redditch says, if you made all the people pay for travel and cut out the scams, they wouldn't have to put up the fares.
And Simon...
Oh, you mean like the rail cards and things? Yeah. Yeah.
And Simon in Croydon makes a really good point and says, I'm shocked about the ticket increases. It's nudging me to jump back into my car. And this is what's going to happen. I commute from London to Brighton 4 days a week, so I may suggest to a work colleague to car share in order to cut costs. And that's the reality, isn't it? People will be forced to hit the roads.
Nathan in Leicestershire has been doing his research. If you want to get a flight from London to Glasgow, 42 quid. By train, £132. No-brainer, he says. Yeah. Oh, he's right, isn't he?
He's right.
If you've got any thoughts, keep them coming through, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And coming up, we're going to be looking at how farmers are reacting to the financial costs they're facing with inflation.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It is 6:35. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. It's very good to have you with us on a Sunday morning. We're all raring to go, aren't we, Ellie?
We certainly are. We're going to take you through the papers now. We're very pleased to say we're joined by journalist and author Ella Whelan and former speechwriter Asa Bennett. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. And Ella, we're going to start with you, shall we, in the Express. And this is Rishi's promise to stop the migrant boats.
Yes, so, I mean, obviously an issue that has been a thorn in the side for the government for a very long time, with reports of increased number of people turning up in the kind of perilous journeys that they get to in small boats. And there has been, you know, if we wind our internal clocks back and think of the Rwanda controversy where the government came out with this suggestion of deportation, and it was thwarted quite quickly and easily by lawyers bringing civil rights cases and human rights cases. And so, you know, the Rishi Sunak's idea now that what he's had meetings behind the scenes, it says secretive meetings in government to find out a way, has announced an upcoming illegal migration bill which would cement into law a plan to, it has to be said, quite a stringent plan, to mean that all asylum claims from those who arrive on small boats will be inadmissible, that not only would it remove the right for them to stay in the country and they wouldn't have their case heard, they would be permanently banned. So it's a very, very strong move from Rishi Sunak. I mean, what happens when it gets into the Commons and indeed through the Lords is another matter entirely. This isn't a done deal by any stretch. But it's certainly, at a time when government needs a bit of a boost electorally, I think it's a play to try and look serious on the migration issue.
Because it is an issue that matters to voters, isn't it?
Of course, and the Prime Minister would say it's one of his big priorities. I think the precise phrasing he had was to pass a law to stop the boats, and so certainly he'll aim to do that. Whether it does, actually on the ground change things for good, we'll have to see. But at the same time, we've seen what he can do when he puts his mind to things like renegotiating the terms of the Northern Ireland Protocol, the so-called Windsor Framework. It's basically part of his 3 Bs that he hopes will help him turn things round: the budget, Brexit and the boats.
Yeah, OK. What do you make of the Sunday Telegraph, Asa, and the latest lockdown files and this Hancock's plan to frighten the pants off the public is the headline?
Yeah, it's the warts and all look we're getting at exactly how Matt and his team were working behind the scenes in the pandemic. I think really what's striking is he almost seems to be enjoying his role there a bit too much, kind of plotting almost how you can really help get British people to be more scared and cranking up the volume on this, deploying the new messaging of the new variant. It's very particularly interesting, and it's a startling insight into...
Is it really?
Well, there's also the way that, there are other bits lower down in the story that talk about how, 1 minute he's plotting to try and get rid of the head of the NHS, Simon Stevens, and the next minute he's trying to sort of see if he can oust an advisor from the SAGE, health committee that he didn't particularly like because they weren't on side. It's sort of a bit of a power trip writ large.
I think so much of the messages reveal what we already knew about Matt Hancock, which is that he's a complete egomaniac. I mean, to a dangerous level.
Do you think?
Well, so much of what he talks about is obsessed with his targets. I mean, he's boiled down the experience of the pandemic to sort of almost, it looks like his first priority is his career and his record. It's all about his targets, and this, again, I share your sort of almost boredom with it, Stephen, because I think a lot of us knew that this was happening, but it's just the extent to which it's laid bare in such kind of explicit detail is shocking. For example, the way in which, we knew that they didn't trust the public throughout this. They knew that they didn't trust us to take sensible precautions and then also do, the things that were necessary, like be able to sit next to each other at a funeral and things like that. But to see it written out, we need to frighten the pants off the public. I think it's that's insulting, that you realise how sort of how kind of shallow the discussions between politicians were about this particular time. And I don't want to necessarily do the whole thing about remind people that people died. But someone like Matt Hancock, who's only recently tried to redeem himself on reality television, I think now is really having his true character shown.
You see, I disagree with you on that, because, I mean, look, I'm not saying that it's, there aren't questions to be asked about it, right? But it's the way it's being portrayed. And I said, when you look at the detail, like the headline doesn't match the key to this. And I was saying, am I the only person who thinks that? Well, no, I'm not. Eliza in Chelmsford said, it's a storm in a teacup taken out of context. I'm glad I'm not alone in thinking so. Joyce and Jeff in Cyprus say it's normal language they're using to discuss the pandemic. It's most definitely a storm in a teacup. Dennis says, hindsight is a wonderful thing. No one knows the consequences of not locking down. We need to move on. What do you think? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Should we look at the Observer?
Yep. Ella, this is you. MI5 ordered to share key facts over Manchester Arena failings. Tell us a bit more about this.
Yes, well, I mean, in line with a discussion about whether or not you can move on, these public inquiries are being released about the Manchester bombing attack. And the one that was just released this week showed that the MI5 had missed a very significant chance to take action against the bomber Salman Abedi. In fact, he'd actually appeared on the radar of MI5 and counter-terrorism police at least 20 times. So this was definitely an individual that was known to them. It was definitely an individual that they had information on. And actually, the Director General of MI5 even came out and apologised to the families and said, basically, we screwed up on this and we're really sorry. But the controversy that the Observer is following is that there is still a reticence within MI5 to share information with the Intelligence and Security Committee, which is within Parliament, who are looking, basically, unless you share the information and are open about what the failings are and are, of course we understand that why there would be secrecy and an unwillingness to be open in MI5, but this is still a very real, Islamist terrorism is still a very real threat. This isn't something that happened in the past and is never going to happen again. And in order to prevent it in the future, we need to have the information and learn the lessons of why we keep ignoring people like Salman Abedi.
So what do you make of this? Because, I mean, there's a lot that we don't know about this, because obviously a national security issue, a lot of this has been done behind closed doors, but MI5 receive thousands of pieces of intelligence every single day, don't they?
Of course.
How much, was this a failing?
Well, MI5 would be deluged with tip-offs, hints about all sorts of investigations they should launch. And there'll be umpteen plots that they've foiled and thwarted due to their work behind the scenes. And so it's the absolutely regrettable sense that, for all the heroic work they do, then those that slip through the net, we then know about it because of the devastating consequences. And so this is why you have to hope they will learn the lessons. They are having to act against their instincts and being very open about this and, hopefully not try and cover things up, but, really show they've moved on.
I did hear an expert on the radio the other day, and I can't remember, I can't put it in context, so I can't remember who it was, but saying, there is the issue with this is MI5 will be desperate to learn from this. This is they would not want this to happen. They will be desperate to make sure this does not happen again. We've got to take some comfort from that, haven't we?
No, I don't think anybody thinks that the people who, the experts who work in security services are cavalier. No. But I think what the question I would have is that there is, in the way in which we talk about instances of Islamist terror in sort of on the media or in wider society and politicians as well, is that we're very hesitant to talk about it fully, to be honest about it, to discuss it properly because of the tensions around allegations of Islamophobia. Still, we can't talk about, for example, the massacre of Charlie Hebdo without someone claiming that it's Islamophobic to do so. And so that kind of atmosphere must have some kind of effect on the way in which people follow reports or people follow leads. And I think information about that is definitely worth finding out about.
Yeah.
Asa, let's look at the Sunday Times, shall we? This is the front page. It's quite a remarkable story, really. Ukrainian parents claiming thousands of children have been abducted.
Yes, this is a really heartrending account of a mother who was living in Kherson, just near the border for Ukraine and Russia, and talks about how her daughter, went off for a school trip for a few weeks, and then was reporting about, how it's very odd we're having to be singing the Russian anthem every day, and being exposed to all this, that, and the other about Russia, and then the daughter disappeared, off to another camp, and then off to another camp, and then was just completely untraceable and lost to the mother. And so this is a story that's similar from many Ukrainian women, particularly who are finding that hundreds of thousands of children have disappeared forcibly into Russian territory. People say it's effectively being abducted, brainwashed. It's part of the kind of cultural appropriation. It's the sort of annexation, if you like, of Ukrainian livelihoods.
The terrifying thing about that is we probably don't know half of the story, do we? I mean, there could be thousands of children. What's your reaction to that story, Ella?
Yeah, it's horrific. It's horrific, and actually it links in with a story that I had in the Sunday Times about continuing to cover the war in Ukraine, about how so many of the city's Bakhmut is, as the Times is reporting, is almost surrounded, almost taken over, and the chaos within a town or a city like that used to have a population of 75,000, now 4,000. And it's not just, in instances of war, it's not just people whose lives are lost, but it's also the chaos that it would create in an area where people are still living. So no kind of proper, health services or education services, but also no way of finding out where people are. Things like telephone lines go down, all that kind of stuff. And, the Times focuses on the fact that even though actually strategically Russia has already sort of won this area, the symbolic importance of an area like Bakhmut, which said, there was a Ukrainian phrase, Bakhmut stands, and it was all about how this was sort of symbolic of Ukrainians' resilience and their continuance to be able to defy Russia might be under threat. And, you know, all you can say is solidarity with Ukraine.
Yeah, it's just... I mean, the more we sort of... It comes a little bit off the news agenda, doesn't it? Because...
You get a weariness.
Because it's ongoing.
Yeah.
It's just ongoing. But it's when you get these little insights and you just think, blimey heck, it's absolutely horrific. Look, back home in the Sunday Express, there's real problems on the high street. 16,000 jobs lost, Asa, in 2 months.
Yes, this is the cost on the high street people are finding of having to handle such sky-high energy bills. And as it stands, the energy bills are going to soar even higher in April due to the withdrawal of the government energy intervention. And so this is all with the drumbeat. It leads up to next week with the budget and how the pressure will be on Jeremy Hunt to try and extend this support so that many more businesses can keep their doors open. And no doubt, I imagine, if you're a betting man, that this is the easiest thing that government will do, because there is a fiscal headroom now due to their swift action to curb inflation. And so this will be, no doubt, a potential bunny they could pull out of the hat to show that they get it, they're trying to take action on the cost of living, because certainly you're going to hear from all sorts of businesses, and many more will be shutting down if they don't get this help.
I mean, wholesale gas prices have been coming down now for weeks, for months. It would make sense, wouldn't it, to pass this on to businesses on our high street that are struggling?
Yes, but I also think there's a kind of, outside of the immediate effect of the cost of living crisis or energy costs, there's also, we've cultivated an anti-high street culture for far too long, and the lockdown, talking about Matt Hancock recently, the lockdown really cemented that, that people wouldn't go out and have a coffee in the local coffee shop or go and do their shopping in the supermarket. So much of it more is done online now for cost reasons. So much people don't go to the pub because it's more expensive than staying in and having a drink. All of that has a knock-on effect. I remember during the lockdown, there was a story of Pret having to let off lots and lots of people, and chains like that having to sack loads of people, and there was a kind of outcry where everyone said, well, why is that happening? That's outrageous. And, it was because nobody's going in there, and that will continue to happen unless you actually go out and patronise the shops in your local high street.
Yeah. OK, we're going to leave it there, but we'll catch you two a little bit later on. Asa and Ella, thank you very much indeed.
Yep, and let us know what you make of any of the discussions that we've just been having there. GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Now, food inflation and food security is at the top of the news agenda pretty much, and rising costs, of course, are affecting everyone, but including farmers across the UK.
GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has been talking to farmers that also have retail interests and are adapting to the future.
Well, your main costs are coming out of your butters and your milks and your flours and sugars. Just right across the board. Unfortunately, in this last 6 months, we've seen a big price rise in everything.
Gareth Corrie explaining the problems around costs in the bakery sector. But Gareth has other business interests, and they're all linked to food production.
Well, we also do beef farming, dairy farming and butcher shops as well, and especially in the beef farming it's getting very, very tight because of the cost of meal and labour costs and just the actual purchase price of the actual animal. It's very hard to make a living at it.
The food chain is a costly thing. It starts with the ground, the seed, all that have to be bought and then fed. And with rising interest rates, cash flows are being pushed.
It's an ever-growing issue. The costs that are going into production, they just keep rising. Now, whether that is electricity, labour being a major one, fuel, fertiliser, all those things, they just keep creeping up. And that's, across the board of food production.
Emily McGowan is the director of Millbank Farm Shop, and most of its produce is from her family's farm. She says direct retail lessens the risks and gives additional income.
Well, it's a tricky market. You're relying on the weather, you're relying on the land, and it's that's farming. Now we have a farm shop now, so we're able to spread that risk and be able to supply the shop, not only other wholesalers.
As with most of the UK, produce prices to the farm gate are being kept low, and farms are now cutting back on larger retail productions.
As a business, we are slowing down and more or less stopping large-scale vegetable production because it's just not viable, unfortunately, anymore for us.
The importation of food is a risk, and will future generations take the gamble?
It's a very volatile market for supermarkets. Are the Spanish farmers going to plant the tomatoes and the peppers next year if they're not getting the money for the produce? Well, I'm a young farmer, and there are many other young farmers coming into the industry, which is very exciting for the industry, that there's a future. But there is only going to be a future if farmers get the right money for what we are producing.
Tuki Biddy, GB News.
So all these pressures, I think farmers are getting a very rough time at the moment.
They really are. And I think we're only just getting, well, I certainly am, only just getting an understanding of what they're up against. And it's programmes like Clarkson's Farm
have really made a difference.
Really put it into the forefront of British people's minds, really, what farmers are up against, because you just wouldn't know. And it's when the food isn't there, and some supermarkets are obviously seeing a shortage of tomatoes and lettuce, things like that. It's then when you start to think, why isn't it there? What's going on? What are they up against?
But it's the ongoing, and it's been going on for years, because we like our cheap milk and we like our cheap veg and all the rest of it. The problem is the supermarkets aren't. We'd have to pay more, but the supermarkets aren't paying the farmers enough.
They're not passing it on, are they?
Which is, again, I mean, that's been going on for decades now, all the concern about that. Farmers get a very rough deal.
Yeah, they do, but at the moment, food security, being self-sufficient, is one of the most important things. And as we said, it's forefront of the news agenda. We've also been talking about rail fare increases. They're going to be up almost 6% from today. Not all of them, but many of them. Terry's been in touch. He says, I went from Derby to St Pancras last weekend. First-class components were shabby. You couldn't see out the windows because they were so dirty. It's time we started developing some national pride.
You're going to fork out for first class. You want it to be nice,
out the window, don't
you? Well, you do. Martin says, with strikes and cancellations, train users should strike on using the trains when they're running. Well, you know what? A lot of people sort of are. The figures are so down at the moment.
Well, and I think in many parts of the country, trains just don't run at the weekends because there'll be engineering works or, issues with staff, and people are finding other ways to do it.
Yeah, Polly says, on a necessary visit from Stockport to Stoke-on-Trent, I nervously boarded a train, already 15 minutes late, after hearing electric cables were down and causing problems. The return from Stoke was chaotic, people trying to board a train but being refused, apologetic announcements, customers mobbing staff for answers they didn't have.
It's just the
grim,
worst,
isn't
honestly.
it?
It is grim out there.
Keep your thoughts coming through on that. Anything else you want to talk about, actually? GBnews at gbnews.uk. Yeah, something cheery would be nice. Here's your weather.
Hello there, I'm Craig Snow, and here is your latest forecast.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, there is a lot going on today, and it's interesting. I'd love to know, GBviews at gbnews.uk, what actually gets your goat a little bit more this morning, because we're looking at rail fare increases, 5.9%, not for all fares, but for a lot of them, so going up hundreds of pounds for a lot of people. Also, Prince Harry's been talking about the fact that it's all over the papers, attacking... I mean, which one's this? The Mirror, saying he's attacking Charles. What he's actually said in attacking Charles is, well, I come from a broken home. Which he does. You know, he does. That's
a fact.
And also, a royal family is different. We know they're not very huggy or touchy-feely and all that sort of thing. And he's clearly struggled with that. But should he be talking about it? Is he any different from millions of other people across the country?
Do you have Harry fatigue? Do let us know. We're also talking about Hancock. This is the latest in the lockdown files. We're hearing he wanted to frighten the pants off the public in terms of getting the public to comply with a new variant to continue to lock down. Is that all a storm in a teacup? Is that taken out of context? Or does this make you really angry? Let us know.
I mean, there's a lot of talk about the language involved because it's sort of casual. Why shouldn't they be more serious and talk about... But it's WhatsApp messages, they're just chatting, and I sort of think, well, you're going to be a bit more casual,
You'd say things
on
WhatsApp you wouldn't say in a broadcast, just like you or I would.
Yeah, or if you're doing a briefing document or anything else, they're talking through it. So I think we're building this up a bit too much. Yeah. But I may be wrong. Let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Annual rail fares increase across England and Wales, leaving thousands of passengers out of pocket.
Good morning to you at 6 o'clock on Sunday, the 5th of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. These are your top stories this morning.
Rail passengers in England and Wales are facing the largest hike in fares for more than a decade. The government says the rise of nearly 6% is below the rate of inflation and that it didn't want to add pressures on households. What do you make of that?
The Prime Minister's reiterated his plans to clamp down on the arrival of illegal migrants. Rishi Sunak said in the Mail on Sunday, if you come here illegally, you will not be able to stay. New laws reportedly to be proposed this coming week.
And many areas of the UK are bracing themselves for freezing Arctic air, which could bring the coldest day of the year for some. We'll be speaking with a weather expert shortly to find out if you'll be affected.
I can't be dealing with any more cold weather.
I thought we were into spring.
I've just had enough of it now. I've got to be honest.
We've had enough.
That's it. Stop it now.
We'd like summer now, please.
Oh, wouldn't it be nice? If you're fed up with the weather or you want to talk about anything else, GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, it's not pleasant news, I'm afraid, because from today, those of you in England and Wales who go on the train will have to pay more for your ticket, as the government introduces the biggest annual price hikes for more than a decade.
Yes, tickets, including season and off-peak, will increase 5.9% from today.
Now, the government is defending the rise, saying, well, it's not in line with inflation, it's lower than inflation, saying they don't want to add pressures on households. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has more.
Please stand well clear of the edge of platform 3.
Rail fares are heading in one direction, up. A 5.9% increase awaits passengers buying tickets from today. It's the biggest rise in a decade. At a time when purses are being squeezed to pulp, it's a hard reality to swallow.
You kind of reconsider using an alternative such as like a bus or, like other different transport than getting on the train.
It does put me off a bit. I'd probably, since the existing price rises over the last 3 or 4 years, have already done that anyway.
Every single year it's gone up, and this is the biggest increase, but now I think it's gone too far. It's getting too high.
The Department for Transport sets fares for a number of regulated tickets, including season and off-peak. A season ticket from Nottingham to London for 5 days costs over £10,000 a year. But from today, that ticket will rise by more than £600. Usually, fares go up by July's Retail Prices Index measure of inflation. Last year, it was 12.3%. The government says it's shielding passengers from the brunt of the costs by keeping the rise closer to 6%. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman said, "I understand it has been a difficult year and people are feeling the pinch, which is why, through the biggest ever government intervention, we capped the rise well below inflation and delayed it coming into force." It's been a rough time on the railways. From strikes to the pandemic, subsidies have kept trains running to the tune of £31 billion.
Well, no one likes prices going up for anything, and it's certainly no different when it comes to rail fares.
Mike Hewitson is head of policy at Transport Focus. The independent watchdog says passenger confidence is suffering.
It's hard for people to accept having to pay more if they're not getting more in return. Paying more for an unreliable service isn't good. So I think the important thing for the railways, if passengers are going to have to pay more, that they get a better service in return. And by that, I mean a service they can depend on.
While the fare cap only applies to some tickets, rail operators tend to follow the trend. When all prices seem high, hiding is wiser than standing out for the wrong reason. Will Hollis, GB News in Nottingham.
Well, our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson has spoken to people in Birmingham about the fare increase. This is what they had to say.
There's not enough trains, they don't run on time, and then they're putting the prices up. There's nothing to justify putting the prices up for the actual customers.
It's just another addition to the costs that are being piled on top of everybody. I come in by train every day, so it will be a real measurable increase in my costs, and it's one I can't avoid if I want to keep my job.
If we want the trains to run back to normal, go back to normal, and we have to give the train drivers and the staff a higher salary, which they need and want, then I don't mind.
Everyone's wanting a pay rise, everybody's wanting something for nothing. There's just not enough money to go around. Inflation's going to come down, so they should look at it in a bit more of a long term.
I've only just found out, and I get the train quite a lot, and due to obviously constant rise of price of living, I think it's a bit of a joke in all fairness, because people constantly have to pay to get to work and stuff like that, and there should be cheaper options, cheaper alternatives.
Well, in the last hour, we spoke to travel expert Simon Calder, travel guru, I think we should call him.
And friend of the programme.
He's friend of the programme. He said ScotRail fares, this is the good news for you, are not going to change, whilst, of course, there is still that most expensive journey that he's found. A 40-minute journey in England is going to cost just short of £30.
They are keeping fares frozen until at least the end of March, and then furthermore they're going to have an experiment whereby they get rid of peak fares completely for 6 months, and hopefully they will get more travellers and more money, and that's the sort of thing that we need to do. But my favourite incredibly expensive ticket is the one from Swindon to Didcot Parkway on the Great Western Route from here to Bristol. It's only 14 minutes of travel. Fair enough, it goes at a fair old whack and covers 24 miles, but that has now gone up to almost £30. Just 30 pence short of £30 for a one-stop 14-minute rail trip.
Ouch. Jason. Hi, Jason. No, it's Carl in Inverness. That's what I was looking for. Sorry. Inverness. We keep talking about Inverness.
You want to be up in Scotland.
I want to go to Inverness.
Yeah.
Anyway, Carl says, one thing to make me happy to be Scottish, the ScotRail fares are frozen for now.
Yeah.
I think that the idea of getting rid of peak time, that, as Simon was saying, they're going to be trying in Scotland, to get rid of those peak time fares, which are so much more expensive, is a really sensible idea. Because you're just going to get more people on, aren't you?
Yep.
And then, so the idea with that is, of course, you get more people on, your revenue goes up. So you charge less. It's like the old supermarket thing. It's stack them high, sell them cheap, but your turnover is huge.
And you get people through the door, because ultimately, is this just going to push people away from the railways? I mean, with the strike action, with engineering works, now with the price fares going up by 6% on many of these journeys, will people even bother anymore? Or will they just get in their car?
Yeah.
Jason says, my journey within London is costing more from today too. So that must be the London Underground as well. The day cap for zone 1 to 6 rose from £6.30 to £6.70. I travel 6 days a week. This is such a joke.
Yeah, and Dee says, I haven't travelled by train for 30 years. How can it be right that taxis subsidise trains? Don't know. Is the honest... I mean, obviously, the government owns the tracks, or the Network Rail is a sort of government company-ish, isn't it? It's all sort of semi... It's very confusing. So it's like we own the tracks, but private companies run the trains. But quite why we have to subsidise it as a country, I don't know.
No.
It's a very good question, actually.
And even...
We just sort of go, oh, yeah, that happens, without thinking about it.
But it is very complicated. Even the rail fare increases that we're seeing is only on about 45% worth of tickets. It's not all tickets.
No.
So it's all a little bit complicated, but it is going up. It's not in the right direction.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, the Prime Minister has vowed to clamp down on migrants claiming asylum in the UK who arrive on those small boats.
Yes, Rishi Sunak has made stopping small boats one of his 5 priorities for 2023, with reports suggesting new laws will soon be introduced to combat them.
Now, currently, asylum seekers have the right to remain in the country to have their case heard. But with these new laws, that would all change.
Well, joining us now is political commentator Lettice Bromowski. Good morning to you,
Good morning.
Lettice. So, front page of the Mail, it's there, front page splash.
Yeah.
Rishi, I'll deport channel migrants with new laws set to be introduced on Tuesday, we believe. Bring us up to speed. What do we know so far?
Yeah, exactly. So that's quite a harsh headline that the Mail have gone with. Realistically, this is just proposed legislation at the moment that will make asylum seekers or migrants who come across the channel in these small boats inadmissible for asylum in the UK, and it'll give the government these greater powers to be able to deport people to places like Rwanda or other safe third world countries. This is clearly Rishi's, drive forward. He sees the general election coming up soon. He's looking to win support with the voters, and we know that this is a popular and contentious topic with a lot of these voters. The immigration levels that we've seen coming across the channel, 45,000 last year, is phenomenally high at the moment. And people are really looking for how he's going to tackle this, how he's going to go about changing this.
It's interesting, though. He's saying, he wants to bring in a law. Well, that's fine. He can get it through, with a bit of luck, he can get it through the processes that he can do. Doesn't mean it's going to get through the courts, because this is going to be challenged, isn't it?
100%. There is no doubt that there is going to be some strong opposition from this. We've already seen when we had the Rwanda plan last time, the huge amount of opposition they came up with, to the extent that that plane never even took off in the end, and that can essentially be classed as a failure at this point. So I imagine he has lawyered himself up, and this will be watertight legally, but these human rights organisations, like you say, the Human Rights Act, will be seeing if this breaches that in any way.
And I mean, the context of all of this is, 45,000 people crossed legally last year, as you say. It's a dangerous journey, isn't it? It's about tackling the human trafficking gangs as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about tackling and stopping people taking this dangerous journey. It was just over a year ago in 2021 that we had that terrible accident where 31 migrants drowned in the Channel as they crossed over. And that's what we really want to stop here. This isn't an anti-immigration measure. This isn't anti-asylum. Our immigration levels have actually gone up since 2016 when we left the EU. This is about stopping these boats coming across and stopping it with the gangs who are exploiting these people and taking their money.
But one of the things which commentators have been... I mean, certainly over the last week, I've heard a number saying Rishi Sunak does not look like a man who wants to necessarily pull us out of the European Court on Human Rights, the European Commission on Human Rights. He's going to... For this to get through, we would have to be out of that, wouldn't we?
Well, I don't know the legal ins and outs of it with the European Court of Human Rights, but I think Rishi's very technocratic approach to things like this, like what we've seen with the Northern Ireland Protocol at the moment, he's very good at bringing all these sides together and really seeing the way through in a way that Boris was very bolsterous and just went headfirst hurtling into things. Rishi seems to be doing this more with his head down and getting things through the line. So I imagine they'll have found somewhere around that, some way to appease all the sides.
Should we touch on something else now in the Privileges Committee interim report into Boris Johnson and whether he misled Parliament?
Yes.
How serious does this look for Boris Johnson now?
It's looking significantly more serious, I think we can say, because he is currently in a position where he may lose his seat in Uxbridge. If they find him to be guilty of misleading Parliament and he gets a suspension, it's looking at currently he'll have a suspension of a month. If it is over 10 days, which a month would be, and the Commons agrees, then he could be forced to have a by-election. So he is looking like he might lose his seat. One thing that I think might be a blessing in disguise is I imagine there are some within the Conservative Party who may see Boris finally stepping back from public life as a positive thing. You know, there's no doubt that he's a thorn in Rishi Sunak's side, perhaps, as things go on, even just recently with the Northern Ireland Protocol and him putting his 2 cents in and saying, you know, he's going to oppose it and he wouldn't stand for Rishi's bill. It's not helpful. And if they ever want any hope, really, of becoming a united front for the general election, this might be a blessing in disguise for them.
OK, Lettice, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
You've been getting in touch this morning on another political issue, which is the WhatsApp messages that are still being published.
Oh, they're going to keep on coming,
But
aren't
I do find this interesting, and I wonder if you agree with this. Terry says, you've hit the nail on the head, Stephen, they are WhatsApp...
Very good.
I'm not always right. I'm sure lots of you disagree with me. They are WhatsApp conversations, not official communication channels. So I'm just saying... there's been nothing which has surprised me yet and which I've thought is scandalous, to be honest.
Gilly in Devon says, really not interested in this at all. The pandemic is over and done with. Has no one experienced WhatsApp messages misunderstandings?
And Gail says, Matt has become a scapegoat for all the perceived wrongdoings of how the pandemic was dealt with. And I agree with that. Actually, I mean, again, not trying to say that he didn't do things that were wrong, and I'm not saying that at all, but it's just like everything seems to be against it. It's like when he was in the jungle and Boy George was saying if his mother, because his mother was ill with COVID, and he was saying if his mother had died, he wouldn't have been able to sit next to Matt Hancock.
He would have left, wouldn't he, he said.
And yet, it was Matt, you know, they were bringing in the lockdowns, weren't they? I mean, what Matt Hancock was doing things which was designed to protect people. Other people are criticising and saying, well, there shouldn't have been lockdowns, there shouldn't have been any of that. In which case, she's criticising him for not doing enough. I mean, I'm very confused by it. Let's be honest, I'm not really getting the criticism.
Yeah, and I'm confused still as to why Matt Hancock even handed over. I mean, remember, he's handed all of these messages over to a journalist. I mean, he must have been thinking there could have been a chance that these could have been leaked. But here we are. We're on day 5, I believe, now, and there's 100,000 messages, so there's going to be a lot more of this to come, I think.
Yeah, I'd love to know if you're interested in this, if you think it's important, if you think they're shocking or revelationary, or is it, to me, and this will make me very unpopular with a lot of colleagues in the business, I think this is media navel-gazing. I think this is the media going, look what we've managed to pull off here, And isn't this shocking? And you will be shocked by this.
Let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Yeah, I'll never get a job at the Telegraph. After that, I tell you. Let's bring you up to date with some of the headlines at 16 minutes past 7. The Duke of Sussex has defended his use of recreational drugs, saying some of them helped him mentally. In his memoir, Harry admitted to regular drug taking, saying he used marijuana whilst living in the grounds of Kensington Palace. Yesterday, he was speaking to the trauma expert Dr. Gabor Mate, who diagnosed him with attention deficit disorder in front of a live audience.
Yes. Wonder what he thought about that. And now, more than 100 nations have completed a historic pact to protect the world's oceans. The legally binding High Seas Treaty aims to put 30% of seas into protected areas by 2030. Environmental groups say the agreement will help reverse marine losses and ensure sustainable development.
Venues across England and Wales will be open later over the King's coronation weekend in May. Pubs, clubs and bars will serve us for an extra 2 hours between the 5th and 7th of May. The Home Secretary says it's so people will have that time to enjoy an extra...
Oh dear.
An extra pint or two.
And you need a glass of water or two, I think.
Oh, a cup of tea.
Or a cup
is what
of tea.
I need. I'm bracing myself for the cold weather, you see.
Oh dear.
What it is. I'm getting myself ready. I'm getting a chest infection in anticipation.
Oh no, no.
I'm not really. I'm fine. Just a frog in my throat. Probably breathing in all your perfume. You see, it's what it is.
Well, it's you that smells good today,
smell
actually.
good today.
I'm telling him he smells great today. But yes, freezing Arctic air. Very, very annoying news. It's set to bring the coldest day of the year so far to various parts of the UK.
Yeah, warnings for snow and ice are coming into effect this week. Forecasters say chilly northerly winds will make the dip in temperature feel like, brace yourselves for it, -4 degrees.
Yes, areas affected by the weather warnings could experience power cuts and travel disruption, while some rural communities may be cut off by the freezing conditions.
Oh, dear. Let's talk to weather journalist Nathan Rao, who's here. Morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Please say something nice.
You're not a fan. You're not a fan of the cold.
I've had enough now.
Yeah, well, we're 5 days into spring and we are heading straight back into winter.
Are we officially in spring then? Now?
We're officially in the meteorological spring, which starts on the 1st of March, as opposed to the astronomical spring, which starts on the 21st of March.
Oh.
So we're officially in spring, but it's not going to feel like it this week.
Right.
No, not good news. What can we expect?
Well, the Met Office has got weather warnings for snow and ice out in Scotland tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday. There is a UK Health Security Agency warning, a health warning for the cold weather in place as well. And we're expecting a pretty lengthy spell of cold weather because we've got this cold blast of air coming down from the Arctic. This is being driven by what's been brewing in the media for weeks now, which is the sudden stratospheric warming event, which is where an event in the Arctic, the winds reverse, basically, and that pushes the polar front down, which is the border between the polar air and the area we are. That makes the jet stream wavy, builds high pressure. It's pretty much similar to what we saw in 2018, if you remember, in February, when we had the beast from the east.
Oh, no.
We're not expecting it to be quite so... Yeah, don't look so scared. Not expecting it to be quite so bad as that. But it's a sort of similar event where we get this high pressure built in and it draws in air from either the north, which is where we're getting it this week, or the east. Not expecting too much for an easterly.
All right, so how cold, what conditions are we expecting from, going from the Shetlands right down to the south coast?
Right. Now, the cold weather is always going to hit the north first, and they're expecting the coldest temperatures. Now, you mentioned -4 there as a wind chill. I think we probably get a bit lower than that in the Glens and the Highlands and places like that. The south, probably about freezing. We must remember, though, we are in the start of spring. The sun is stronger now, so in the sunshine, it might actually feel quite mild at times in the south. But the problem is, when we get milder air coming in from the southwest, when we've got this cold air from the north sitting over us, and the two meet, that is when you get snow, and this is where the snow warnings are going to come in. And we might get that in the south this week. We might. But the main warnings are for the north, but it could be anywhere. We're going to have a cold snap.
But snow in this country often means that the country grinds
It
to
will
a
grind
head. We're going
to-
to
and
see
it's-
disruption, aren't we?
Yeah, and just talking about all the rail fares and the rail problems and disruption. Yes, I was in here before Christmas talking about snow. We had a bit of snow and it was absolute chaos.
Yeah.
We get snow in the south, yeah. I mean, the warnings, the Met Office warnings in the north do warn of travel disruption, and be prepared for that.
All right, let's be specific. What do we mean by the south?
The south, so anything sort of, cut the country in half. Scotland, northern England, northeast England, Yorkshire, that sort of area is always going to get the coldest weather.
Yeah.
The south, where we are, London, Cornwall, southeast, that sort of area.
What about Midlands?
Midlands, yeah, they're going to be in the cold as well. They're going to get some cold weather this week. I mean, everywhere, Stephen, this week is going to be cold, and possibly beyond. And it's not even today. I mean, I was coming in this morning. It's cold out there, but it's starting tomorrow. The cold air is arriving properly tomorrow. So, Stephen, if you don't like the cold, then tomorrow's...
I know, I'll be staying in.
Yeah, you...
honestly, but it's because we're still in this state where you're sort of thinking, oh, I'd have to put the heating on.
Yeah, but we're nearly... I mean, you know, summer's not far off. I mean, this is not unusual. We do get this at this time of year. As I mentioned, 2018, we had the beast from the east. That was a bad one, but...
It might not be unusual, but wasn't it was it the first lockdown? And it was around about sort of March, April time.
Yeah.
And it was red hot.
Yeah, and this time last year, actually. This time last year, we were talking about hot weather now arriving in March. But, you know, we are in that part of the world where I'm always talking about the jet stream. And depending on whether we're right, it's, you know, the jet stream goes right across the system. It's above us, we get encouragement from the south, which is warmer. And if it's below us, we get from the north. It can move in a day. So we're in that part of the world where it can change on a hairpin like that. And we're just going through a cold snap now. So wrap up. No barbecues yet, no summer hats yet, no T-shirts yet.
I thought we were in spring.
Well, we are.
I was putting away my winter coats. I was packing it all away. I'm going to have to get them all back out again, aren't I?
About 10 days, 2 weeks, maybe, fingers crossed.
Up to 2 weeks?
Up to 2 weeks, some forecasts are saying. I mean, the thing with this high-pressure systems that we get caused by sudden stratospheric warming or any high pressure is they're quite stubborn. And it needs the Atlantic, the effects from the Atlantic to shove it out of the way, and the jet stream as well.
Yeah.
We've got a wavy jet stream at the moment, which is building high pressure, which is part of the reason why we're drawing in those northerly winds. And we've just got to sit it out and wrap up.
Yeah. Sudden stratospheric warming.
Sudden stratospheric warming, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you call it SSW in the business?
Yes.
Oh, I just wondered.
In the biz.
In the biz.
We've got an SSW on the way. Yeah. No, I just wondered. It's quite like these little turns of phrase. It makes me feel educated.
Me too.
Yeah. Do you know why we love you? Is because you make weather so interesting.
Thank you very much. It's so fun to talk to you about it. Thank you.
We can just talk to you all day about
but
the weather.
But you know, because we love our weather, don't we?
We do.
I mean, that's the thing.
You know, the British people will always talk about the weather, whatever it's doing, and it's always doing something. So there you go.
Well, it is.
And it can be a bit mad, like we're seeing this week.
Oh.
Just when you think we're out of the woods.
And I thought, I was thinking, you know, the hot water bottle could go away and everything now.
Well, it can't.
But it can't.
You're going to need it on and the fire on.
Well, you see, I'm still very, very careful with the heating.
Well,
very careful with the heating, but, you know, I'm heating a room at a time as I need it.
Yeah, and that's a very serious point, isn't it? I mean, if people are really struggling with their energy bills, this is the last thing they're going to need this week, isn't it? Let us know what you think about that. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Don't go anywhere, though, because we're talking strikes in just a couple of minutes. This time, if you're trying to pass your driving test, you're going to have a problem.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Still lots more to come.
Yeah, rev your engines. The F1 season is back in action this afternoon. Dutchman Max Verstappen appearing to be unstoppable already. We'll talk to an F1 journalist at 8:20.
And a police force is on the hunt for new recruits, but it's not what you may think. Tune in at 9:20 to find out more, and I'm very much looking forward to that. They look very cute.
Should be what the police officers. You just keep your eyes forward, darling. Eyes forward.
It's not what you may think, I said.
Yeah.
It's the cute kind.
I'll be having words with Gerard.
Yeah, well. Let us know what you're up to today.
Yeah.
And if you've got any thoughts about what we're talking about today, gbnews@gbnews.uk.
We're talking about the lockdown files because you were all agreeing with me. So with me saying, I just don't get the fuss, really. But thankfully, Jerry disagrees. Hi, Jerry. It's always not, because you know what, I like it when people disagree with me because I'm not saying I'm right. This is just what I was thinking. It doesn't mean I'm right, and I'm always happy to change my mind. Anyway, Jerry says, I do disagree with you, Stephen. These are not a storm in a teacup. These messages from Matt Hancock. They're the most serious revelations to have come to light for as long as I can remember. They've given us, the little people, further insight to the ineptitude of the political classes.
OK. I think it's fun. Do you know what I do like about this channel? Is when people disagree, they can do it very politely.
Nicely.
And you can do it without falling out.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jerry, for that.
Yeah.
But I must say, you're very popular on Twitter with
am I?
people. Yes, Elle's just been in touch saying Stephen, GB News, is on fire this morning.
Fire.
Journalists are indeed navel-gazing with the WhatsApp messages. Look at all the news around the world that we should be discussing. Let's move on, she says. So,
yeah, well, whatever your view, we want to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, if you're a learner driver... Oh, I remember it well. It's such a relief to pass my test.
Yeah. How many times did it take you?
First
Of course,
time.
I shouldn't have asked. I knew
How many times for you?
3 times.
3. Is that all?
No, it was 3. I don't know how I passed the third time, to be honest with you. When I drive now, people are like, how long ago did you pass? Thinking it was very sick. I was like, oh, that would be 10 years ago.
Anyway, look, if you are a learner driver across the UK, and we're smiling, you won't be, you're going to have to wait for about 6 months to sit your test because driver examiners are set to strike.
Yes, it comes as many drivers continue to face delays due to a backlog from the pandemic and poor weather conditions as well.
Let's talk to the CEO of Red Driver Training, Seb Golding, who's here. Good to see you this morning. Did you drive in?
I got a taxi.
Oh, there you go.
Early to drive.
Now, look, I mean, this is hugely frustrating, actually, because it's not only that they're having to wait for their test, but you've got to keep with the training otherwise you're going to get out of practice.
Yeah, you have.
So it's going to cost more all round.
Yeah, I mean, it's very frustrating. I mean, the whole thing hasn't unwound since COVID either. So we're looking at delays of at least 6 months in many parts of the country. And, you know, whilst we empathise with the examiners and their right to go on strike, it's not helping. It's not helping at all.
So paint a picture for us, because it does seem like the perfect storm.
Yeah,
This is a hangover from COVID, a lot of it, isn't it?
It is. And so, I mean, the learning to drive industry was closed down for a year and a half in COVID. So every year, 750,000 people turn 17. The average age of the learners in our business is actually 26.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is quite surprising. And what we're finding is economically, a lot of people, it's not cheap to learn to drive.
No.
But what learning to drive is, in kind of when I was growing up, it was a rite of passage. But now it's freedom. It's an economic enabler. You know, it gives new career opportunities, career choices. So people, when they sort of get early into their careers, that's when they decide they want to learn to drive.
What about instructors themselves? I mean, because obviously very difficult during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But is there a sense now for driving instructors? I mean, if we've got a backlog, that the work's coming out their ears, is it?
We've never been so busy. So we at Red, we train one in 4 driving instructors. So it takes about 6 months to qualify as a driving instructor, and then their diaries are immediately full. They're very busy.
Yeah.
And yeah, as a business, we've never had so many inquiries coming in of people wanting to drive. And I mean, you also mentioned, you know, rail fares are going up. Trains are unreliable, so there are more and more reasons that people are wanting to drive.
It's going to hit you, though, isn't it? In the sense that, I mean, because it seems that if people are looking for a job, and it seems like it's a great opportunity at the moment. But numbers could drop off, couldn't they? If people are saying, well, what's the point in doing this? I can't get a test.
Well, I mean, it is a challenge to get tests, and with the strikes that are happening from next week onwards, what we're advising people is that they should show up at the test centre anyway. Because even though some examiners are on strike, they're not necessarily going to cancel all tests. And the DVSA will then automatically rebook people, but they can get more proactive and go online and look for cancellations as well.
Right.
And what are the examiners' reasons for going on strike? What are they looking for?
That's paying conditions. You know, they're civil servants. So just looking for better paying conditions.
I always think driving examiners and instructors should get danger pay. Frankly, I mean, let's be honest.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I get that totally.
Yeah.
And is the backlog? Are you feeling the pressure on the front line when you're teaching people how to drive? Just knowing the sheer amount of people that you need to get through.
I mean, people, you know, your driving test is it can be quite a traumatic event for people. It's stressful, and if you don't know when it's going to be, and then if you have something booked, and as you pointed earlier, Steve, you've got to keep having either lessons or practicing just to keep yourself test ready and on the boil. And then if you think you've got a test tomorrow and suddenly you don't, it's massively frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you can't overestimate, I think, how stressful... I mean, I was stressed to the high heavens.
You still passed
made my teeth
time.
Whistle.
My hand was shaking so much I couldn't turn the ignition key. It's super stressful. Yeah.
It's awful, isn't it?
Did you pass first time as well? Are you one of these annoying people?
Yeah.
You two, honestly.
I tell you what, though, I mean, for those who are thinking about it, I'd sort of say don't let it put you off, because actually it's such a life skill.
It is, yes.
Isn't it, to be able to drive? And it's also that thing of once you've passed your test, that's when you learn to. I mean, that's what they always say to you. Well, you'll learn to drive once you've passed your test.
Yeah.
Right, but that's actually how it works. It's experience. It's really important.
It is. I mean, things have changed. You can now drive on a motorway as a learner, and that only came in a few years ago, which is great because, you know, not being. Although they are the safest roads, you need the experience on there.
Yeah.
But we're also finding a lot of corporate clients are coming to us and asking us to work with their sort of new graduates and apprentices to get them through the driving test.
Right.
Because they get recruited into the business and the one skill they don't have is a driving licence.
Yeah.
It's vital, isn't it, for your freedom and for getting around and a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How much is a driving lesson these days? Is it still about
kind of varies around the country? No, it's a bit more than that. It's mid £30 an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. You see, it adds up.
It does.
Up. And what you're looking at for an average? I mean, do you have an average sort of number of lessons that people would need?
Yeah, we recommend 40 hours.
40?
Yeah. But if you think that you've got, if you apply for a test now, you'd be waiting 6 months anyway. Yeah. So you've got lots of time to spread the hours out over time.
Would you book the test before you start the lesson almost, and then?
A lot of people are now.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
So the process is you can't book a test till you pass the theory.
Right.
And you can't take the theory until your 17th birthday. So if you really want to optimise it, you study for theory, pass the theory
on your birthday,
on your 17th, and then and then book the test, which is likely to be 6 months out from there.
Right. Oh well, that's not a bad way of doing it.
No.
Seb,
good tip.
Yeah, it is a good tip. Seb, it's really good to see you this morning.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
indeed.
Oh, it gives me the chills thinking about learning how to drive.
Oh yeah, but once you've done
really
it,
know how to do it.
Once you've done it, it's such a joy. It's such a joy to be able to have that freedom and.
Yeah. You love your cars.
I do love my car. I love driving. I love my driving. Look, don't go anywhere. We've got the Showbiz stories with Steph in just a few minutes, and we'll also have a look at the papers for you. It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
"7:41. Good morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
And it's time to go through the papers now. And joining us this morning is journalist and author Ella Whelan and former speechwriter Asa Bennett. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Ella, let's start with you, shall we? Net zero, this is in The Observer. It's their front page.
Yes, so, I mean, we've been, in the last round of the paper review, we were talking about all the things that Rishi Sunak is trying to make a success of, whether it's the Northern Ireland Protocol or plans for a new immigration bill. And this is something that's rather embarrassing for the government, which is that some cabinet ministers have been warned that the failure to come up with any policies related to net zero, any concrete plans about how they're going to meet the targets that they themselves have set, means that there could be a legal threat. There actually could be a legal threat against Grant Shapps himself as the minister who's linked to and in charge of these things, because the targets, that there have been no plans announced about how they're going to meet these targets. And I just thought it was interesting because, I mean, obviously that it shows a kind of certain level of incompetence within the government in that they make these announcements net zero by 2030, 2035, whatever it is, and there's very little meat on the bones. But I think also for a lot of people this will be quite eye-opening, because the discussion about net zero and how to tackle climate change has always been at a certain level quite undemocratic. I mean, whether it be the institution of the ULEZ in London, low traffic neighbourhoods, clampdowns on what kind of boiler you can get, all these kind of things. There hasn't been a huge amount of public discussion about whether or not, particularly in a cost of living crisis, paying more money in green levies or having less access to cheap energy and all that kind of thing is a good thing, whether net zero is a good plan. And so to compound on top of that the fact that now there will be another undemocratic process, legal threats to a government about their plans, I think it's not just embarrassing for the government, but I think it shows something of the undemocratic nature of a lot of the discussion about how to balance good quality of life with tackling climate change.
How would you be more democratic, though, in that sense? We don't put everything to a referendum.
No, but I think there hasn't been, some of the changes and some of the announcements that have been made, not just sort of the announcement that we're going to have net zero by 2030 or whatever the year is, which is, within that announcement will, if they get their act together and actually announce some plans, could drastically change people's lives. It could mean that, the way you heat your house would have to change, what kind of car you could drive would have to change, or actually your quality of life could lower because, in a cost of living crisis, we know that certain things are far more expensive, and we haven't ever had a sort of national conversation about that.
But the problem with democracy on that, and I get your point, the problem with democracy on that front is there can't be any democracy on this, can there? Because in effect, all the political parties agree.
Well, absolutely.
I mean, they might have slightly different policies or whatever, but they all agree.
It's a real problem. And, the Observer quotes Rishi Sunak as talking about the need to cut carbon emissions as a moral duty. So, nobody's sitting here saying, do you know what I'd love to do, set the planet on fire and, let's just not care about Mother Nature. No one's saying that. But we're saying don't turn this into emotional moral duty. This is a political question about how you balance having a future planet to live in with making sure that people have a good quality of life in the here and now. And I think, it's just... this can't be just poo-pooed away as another policy to be tick-boxed by Rishi Sunak. This is a serious thing that could affect people's lives.
You see, it's why I love having you on, Ella, because you always bring a perspective that I'd never thought of, which is important.
Yeah,
I love it.
I love being difficult. That's another way of putting it.
Well, yeah, that's true, yeah. It's great. So I think that's a really interesting point, actually.
No, it really is. Right, you've both got stories on Sue Gray. So should we start with you, Asa? This is in The Sun, and it's about her son.
Yes, basically, it's The Sun in The Sun is really, pardon me, somewhat loose-lipped, allegedly, on the campaign trail in Uxbridge, in that he's said to be helping Labour's candidate who wants to oust Boris Johnson come election time, and is also said to be sort of rather mouthing off a bit about, did you know who my mother is? My mother is, Sue Gray. She's the head of proprietary ethics. She's about to go and join Labour, all this sort of thing. And that, crucially, it's rumours, it's noises off, but it'll only fuel the rumour mill of Sue Gray's move over to Labour, about whether it's some sort of establishment stitch-up, all very cosy, given that, you know, as we know for the civil service, you are meant to leave your beliefs at the door. She may well then clearly have picked them up again, because, you know, she could have stayed in the Whitehall machinery and waited, if there was to be a Keir Starmer administration, and helped as an official, but she wants to do even more than that, clearly. She made a conscious choice. She wants to go further and faster as a political aid.
Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with that, because the argument here, we were talking to Charlie Rowley yesterday, who's Michael Gove's old spad, and he's saying, well, look, you know, of all the dealings he had with her, there was nothing to indicate that she didn't leave her political leanings at the door when she was a civil servant.
Oh, and I'd agree, but it's more when you then think, OK, how has this job been arranged, when, you know, for the months and years that she would have been dealing with Tory ministers, you know, poring over all the sort of ethical sort of snags and, you know, knowing basically where all the bodies are buried. She has an absolute motherload of intel, no doubt, she could be using for Labour. Officially, the government has to decide whether it's acceptable, how soon she could go over. You know, there could be a delay, a few months, maybe till after the election, who knows? But then you can really bet that all the ways she knows how government operates, the way she's dealt with these Tory ministers up close, you know, that is very useful for the opposition.
Well, you can see exactly why Sir Keir Starmer would want her on side. I mean, there seem to a lot of people like the government in waiting, and they want someone who's been on the inside.
Oh, clearly. But then, you know, she's the insider's insider. And given that she effectively is the personification of Partygate and Boris's tormentor, you know, it's definitely something that's got the Tories riled. And at the same time, it gives Labour that credibility they want to try and aspire to. But it does really smack of something very sort of cosy and insidery in the same way.
OK. I hate to say it, we're out of time.
Are we really?
That's... yes, we are.
Too much gabbing on.
So you've got to go. You will be back. You will be back. You can tell us about Greygate in the next one.
More grey to come.
And lots of lovely other things as well. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
A little bit later on. We need to get them out because we've got lots of interesting things to talk about, including lots of showbiz in a minute. But I've got to say, there's loads and loads of views that we've got to touch on. And someone else who disagrees with me on the WhatsApp messages. No, this is good because I think it's all about having a conversation. Nigel, hi Nigel, says, Stephen, in the main I agree with your point of view, but with Hancock I don't. He's a useless minister, and showing him to be that is needed. He portrays himself as a misunderstood man, but in reality, he was in a role way above his intellectual ability.
Karen agrees with you. Matt Hancock is being blamed for everything. Well, it's not quite what you said, but it agrees with our other viewers that spoke before. It's not fair to make him the scapegoat for everything that went wrong. I am fed up of it all. Just let it go and leave him alone.
Yeah, I love the fact we've got all sides on that. So keep your thoughts coming through, gbviews@gbnews.uk. In the meantime, the bit I've been waiting for all morning, because it's just the delight of turning round this way and seeing what she's wearing, which is always fabulous. Stephanie Tetchy.
Good morning.
You're envisioning avocado this morning.
Stop it. Where is my avocado this morning? I'm wearing it.
You're wearing it. How are you, darling?
I'm good, thank you. Had a nice Saturday night at home.
Oh, did you? Nice
chilling.
And chilled.
Yeah.
What makes a change for you?
I've been watching something on Netflix. It's called, I can't say the title of it. I feel like it's a bit rude for morning TV.
Is it? What is it?
It's called Sex Life. It's really good. Fine. It's really good. And it's not raunchy as it sounds, but it's a great drama series.
I've heard people talking about that.
It's so addictive.
Right. Oh, well, that's something to add to the list, isn't it? Yeah. Can we talk about Kylie?
I know, we love Kylie, don't we? She's been like an honorary Brit for the past 3 decades. She's lived in London. But reports have been coming out that she's actually turned down her opportunity to perform at the King's coronation concert.
Really?
She moved back to Australia last year, but in Australia at the moment, there have been growing calls for the country to become a republic. And the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, he says that, you know, due to respecting the Queen's death, he will not put a referendum out just yet during his first term, but it is on the cards. So I think Kylie's read the room and she's like, it might be a bit of a disrespect to Australians for her to perform at the concert. She's previously performed at the Queen's birthday just in 2018 for her 92nd birthday. But it seems for the King's coronation, a lot of pop stars have been turning down the invitation. We've had Adele, Ed Sheeran, Harry Styles, Elton John, who said he's going to be performing around the same time. So at the moment, it seems like the concert organisers are in a bit of a pickle on who to get. I don't know, actually. I think there's a lot of reasons. But the thing is, I think as a pop star, you have to think this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's not often we're going to see the king being coronated and celebrating that moment as a country. So rumour has it, like a lot of the organisers are thinking to replace the gaps with more classical and military themed performances.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot to be said for that, but it changes the tone of the gig, doesn't it?
It does, because, you know, if we think about the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, everyone was running to, you know, be on stage and be a part of this momentous occasion. And so now it feels like it's a new term, but...
Yeah. What do you think the difference is then? Because that's so interesting. Platinum Jubilee, it was like star after star was on that stage. And this is less than a year later, and it seems like they're struggling to...
I hate to say this, but I feel like the Queen had more star power. I think she was more iconic in that sense, because she had 70 years. The Queen was like everybody's grandma, and I think we're still kind of getting used to having this new change of monarch and how it's going to be, how King Charles's reign's going to be, and him trying to connect more with the younger audience. And I think because the Queen just had that royalty and that respect. Not saying King Charles hasn't got it. I think it's just easy.
There's more to earn, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think there's obviously a lot of controversy. I think since the Queen's gone now, there's a lot of countries such as Australia who are having those conversations about the monarchy and whether they still want that head of state as King Charles there. But, you know, there's people like Lionel Richie and Take That who might be performing. So not all is lost. But Kylie, I'm a bit surprised on her, because we love Kylie and she should have done a little lucky number for us.
Yeah, she should have done, actually. That would have been great, actually. Talking of star power, Johnny Depp really doing. It's like something out of a newspaper story, isn't it? Well, I suppose it is.
He had
thinking about it. What a stupid thing to say, Dixon.
He had a 007 moment in Lincolnshire on Friday. So he's been living in the capital in London for a bit, but apparently he went to an antiques shop up there. But he arrived by chopper. I think we've got a clip of it. And the reason why he arrived by chopper is because he didn't want to generate too much attention and he didn't want to be bombarded by the public, so he decided to land by a chopper, 007 style. Apparently he was shopping in there. The owner, Robert Miller, has said that he bought a desk chair, 3 guitars, a lot of quirky items and posters and paint sets.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was like, it's not every time you have Johnny Depp coming into your store.
Wouldn't that be nice? It's just like a little old antique shop and he just flew in.
I'm a bit surprised, like, you could have taken a car, Johnny. You didn't need to do the chopper.
How that's meant to be incognito. Massive chopper.
I know, and I think there's a video of him playing guitars in the shop as well, so it's interesting. There he is.
I mean, look, I don't know what it is about Johnny Depp. All the controversy there's been, but you just got to love it.
You got to love a bit of Johnny.
You have. Lovely stuff, Steph.
Lots of love.
We don't see you again today, do we?
No, hopefully I'll be back next week with more Showbiz.
Yes, you will.
Thank you, guys.
I'm going to insist on it. Don't go anywhere. All the top stories coming up after the weather.
Hello there, I'm Craig Snow and here is your latest forecast from the Met Office. Well, as we go through the next few days, it's certainly set to turn a good deal colder across the UK, return of some overnight frost and also the risk of some ice and snow. Reason for the change is we finally start to say goodbye to this area of high pressure, and that allows us to drag in some very cold air from the Arctic. Not quite there just yet on Sunday, and for a lot of England and Wales we remain rather cloudy but largely dry. There will be a few showers around. For Scotland and Northern Ireland, a much brighter day here than on Saturday, with a mixture of sunny spells and a scattering of showers, and some of these showers potentially will be falling as sleet and snow across the high ground. Temperatures today generally ranging between 6 to 9 degrees, so that's very similar to what we saw on Saturday. And then going into the evening, we start to see the clearer skies across the north gradually sink their way southwards towards southern England. A few showers around, but more widely across the north, with this band of rain and hail snow sinking its way towards Scotland as we go through the course of Sunday evening. And behind it, as we go into the early hours of Monday morning, some very cold air moving into Scotland, widely seeing sleet and snow across the country with the risk of some ice too. To the south of it, a colder night then of late, risk of a patchy frost in a few spots. And then that will set us up for a mixture of sunny spells and a scattering of showers across the south on Monday. But more significantly across the north, turning colder as the day goes on, widely seeing showers across Scotland turn to sleet and snow, and eventually also across parts of northern England as we go into the afternoon. So do please be aware if you are travelling across the northern half of the UK on Monday that there could be some disruption due to snow and ice. And then going forward, as we move into Tuesday and Wednesday, very similar, most of us seeing some very cold conditions, risk of some snow, and not always across the north. We could just see some snow at times in the south too.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, I'm Michael Portillo. You can join me every Sunday on GB News. Remember to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel and to download the GB News app to stay up to date with the latest GB News content. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Annual rail fares increase across England and Wales, leaving thousands of us out of pocket.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Sunday, the 5th of March.
It's 8 o'clock.
Oh, it's 8 o'clock.
Sorry.
It's 8 o'clock. It's 8 o'clock. on Sunday the 5th of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. Here are your top stories this morning.
Rail passengers in England and Wales are facing the largest hike in fares for more than a decade. The government says the rise of nearly 6% is below the rate of inflation, and it didn't want to add to pressures on households. But what do you think?
The Prime Minister has reiterated his plans to clamp down on the arrival of illegal migrants. Rishi Sunak told the Mail on Sunday, if you come here illegally, you will not be able to stay, with new laws reportedly being proposed in the next week.
And rev your engines, the F1 season skids into action today. But can Lewis Hamilton, George Russell and Lando Norris catch the Flying Dutchman Max Verstappen? We'll have all the analysis for you. Do you not like my Verstappen?
I really enjoy it. And I don't enjoy skid into action. And gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Does it?
Yeah, I don't know. Skid into action.
No,
don't know.
Anyway, if you want to get in touch, if you want to skid into action on your emails this morning, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Now, the Prime Minister has vowed to clamp down on migrants claiming asylum in the UK who arrive on small boats.
Yes, Rishi Sunak has made stopping small boats one of his top 5 priorities for 2023, with reports suggesting new laws will soon be introduced to combat them.
Now, currently, asylum seekers have the right to remain in the country and have their case heard, but the new legislation would block that route if they arrive through illegal means.
Well, joining us now is our political reporter, Olivia Utley, who joins us from Windsor. Good morning to you, Olivia. So the front page of the Mail this morning, their big splash is Rishi saying, I'll deport Channel migrants. New laws, they say, set to be introduced this week. So tell us, what more do we know?
Well, it's a pretty big policy announcement from the government. They're proposing to put forward this legislation on Tuesday. Essentially, what would happen is that anyone arriving on small boats would be deported immediately to Rwanda or another third country, a third safe country, they call it. Obviously, this is a big part of Rishi Sunak's, one of his 5 pledges is to stop the small boats, and it marks a big gap in policy with Keir Starmer, who actually didn't mention small boats in his speech the other day where he set out his 5 plans for government. So Rishi Sunak hopes this is going to be a real vote winner. Whether this legislation will actually make it all the way through the House of Commons is another question, because we know that it is popular among Conservative MPs. When polled, the public comes out very much against the small boats and very much wants to deal with the crisis, which means that Conservative MPs are supportive of any measures to deal with it. Labour obviously will oppose it. It should get through the first stage in the House of Commons, but we know that any measures to deal with the small boats crisis tends to get held up in the Lords, and then of course there's the issue of it going through the courts afterwards. And previously what we've seen is human rights groups and human rights lawyers intervening at the last minute, bringing a case to court, changing case law and making it very difficult for the government to get through a law like this. But we do know this will be very popular with Rishi Sunak's own backbenchers, and any sign that he's working on those 5 pledges that he gave a few weeks ago, it feels finally as though the tide is sort of beginning to turn in Rishi Sunak's favour, and something like this could make that turn more solid.
And we do know from the polling that this is a very important issue for a lot of voters in the UK. So what pressure is this, because he's made such a strong commitment here, what pressure does this now put on Keir Starmer, as you say, who's not really addressed this directly in the same way so far?
It certainly puts quite a lot of pressure on Keir Starmer. It was a very notable omission from his speech the other day, and a few journalists actually asked for it, mostly from the Mail, the Sun, the Telegraph, the sort of voters, the sort of swing voters who Keir Starmer needs to get on side. And at the moment, the problem with these asylum seekers coming to the UK is that the average wait time for their case to be heard is 423 days. So we've got these hotels all over places, mainly around the south coast, filled with asylum seekers, and of course that has its own impact on the social and economic structure of particular areas. So it is an issue which voters feel very strongly about. So it'll be fascinating to see in the next few days and weeks how Keir Starmer responds to this, and if that issue of small boats begins to move up his political agenda.
We were in the studio with you yesterday talking about the lockdown files. We've got the latest today. This is Matt Hancock's plan to frighten the pants off the public. That's the front page of the Sunday Telegraph today, about the new variant that was around at the time, the Kent variant, and trying to ensure compliance amongst the British public. Tell us a bit more about this.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. These lockdown file stories just keep coming, and it seems as though what we're gathering about Matt Hancock is this picture of a man who wanted to put his own stamp on politics and found that perhaps one useful way to do that was through managing people's response to the virus. What I found particularly interesting about today's lockdown file story was the behaviour of Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, who's been under quite a lot of pressure in recent weeks over the Richard Sharp affair, but is now under scrutiny for his response to the COVID pandemic. And it seems as though there's a very interesting quote where Alok Sharma, the then business secretary, was pushing back against some COVID measures which he thought were overly draconian and would do harm to the economy. And Simon Case's response is to say that he's exhibiting pure Conservative ideology, and it's certainly not meant to sound like a compliment. So there's a very interesting story in the Telegraph today suggesting that Conservative MPs are now pushing back against Simon Case, suggesting that he was showing left-wing bias in his response to the COVID pandemic. And of course, seeing another when Sue Gray is under quite a lot of scrutiny at the moment for perhaps showing some left-wing bias herself. The last thing that the civil service needs is another very senior civil servant being looked at in that light.
We'll catch up with you a little bit later on, but for now, thank you. Now, from today, if you're in England and Wales, well, it means you're going to have to dig deeper for your train ticket as the government introduces the biggest annual price hikes in more than a decade.
Yes, tickets including season and off-peak will increase 5.9% from today.
Now, the government has defended the rise because it's not in line with inflation, it's lower than inflation, and they say that's because they don't want to add pressure on households who are already struggling. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has more.
Please stand well clear of the edge of platform 3.
Rail fares are heading in one direction, up. A 5.9% increase awaits passengers buying tickets from today. It's the biggest rise in a decade. At a time when purses are being squeezed to pulp, it's a hard reality to swallow.
You kind of reconsider using an alternative such as like a bus or, like other different transport than getting on the train.
It does put me off a bit. I'd probably, since the existing price rises over the last 3 or 4 years, have already done that anyway.
Every single year it's gone up and this is the biggest increase, but now I think it's gone too far. It's getting too high.
The Department for Transport sets fares for a number of regulated tickets, including season and off-peak. A season ticket from Nottingham to London for 5 days costs over £10,000 a year. But from today, that ticket will rise by more than £600. Usually, fares go up by July's Retail Prices Index measure of inflation. Last year, it was 12.3%. The government says it's shielding passengers from the brunt of the costs by keeping the rise closer to 6%. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman said, "I understand it has been a difficult year and people are feeling the pinch, which is why, through the biggest ever government intervention, we capped the rise well below inflation and delayed it coming into force." It's been a rough time on the railways. From strikes to the pandemic, subsidies have kept trains running to the tune of £31 billion.
Well, no one likes prices going up for anything, and it's certainly no different when it comes to rail fares.
Mike Hewitson is head of policy at Transport Focus. The independent watchdog says passenger confidence is suffering.
It's hard for people to accept having to pay more if they're not getting more in return. Paying more for an unreliable service isn't good. So I think the important thing for the railways, if passengers are going to have to pay more, that they get a better service in return. And by that, I mean a service they can depend on.
While the fare cap only applies to some tickets, rail operators tend to follow the trend. When all prices seem high, hiding is wiser than standing out for the wrong reason. Will Hollis, GB News in Nottingham.
Well, we've been finding out what people in Birmingham make of all of this.
There's not enough trains, they don't run on time, and then they're putting the prices up. There's nothing to justify putting the prices up for the actual customers.
It's just another addition to the costs that are being piled on top of everybody. I come in by train every day, so it will be a real measurable increase in my costs, and it's one I can't avoid if I want to keep my job.
If we want the trains to run back to normal, go back to normal, and we have to give the train drivers and the staff a higher salary, which they need and want, then I don't mind.
Everyone's wanting a pay rise, everybody's wanting something for nothing. There's just not enough money to go around. Inflation's going to come down, so they should look at it in a bit more of a long term.
I've only just found out, and I get the train quite a lot, and due to obviously constant rise of price of living, I think it's a bit of a joke in all fairness, because people constantly have to pay to get to work and stuff like that, and there should be cheaper options, cheaper alternatives.
Oh, not everyone's sympathetic, though, are they, to all of this? Rachel, hi Rachel, says the cold peak fares are designed to limit people travelling. Nottingham to London for 200 days is 50,000 miles. £10,000 doesn't seem unreasonable.
Interesting, yeah.
If you break it down per mile and all the rest, mind you, £2 a mile is quite a lot, to be fair, isn't it? Oh, mind you, no, 10,000, 50,000, no, I see what you mean. Yeah, I get your point. Maths isn't necessarily my strong point, Rachel. But I get your point, but 10 grand out your salary.
Yep.
And taking tax into account, you're looking at, obviously, even it's a bigger chunk.
It's a good whack, isn't it?
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, and Nicola makes that point. She says, my view is all people employed under PAYE should be able to deduct their train costs from their gross salary, which is what self-employed are able to do.
Yeah,
It's a great chunk, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of people can do with their companies, and you might not necessarily get it out of your gross salary, but a lot of companies, big companies, do offer these sort of things where you
Get
pay.
expensed almost.
Well, no, you have to pay it back, but you sort of the company will fork out your 10 grand, if it were, and then you pay it back over the year, every month, and it just comes out your salary, which is a way of softening the blow, but it's still the blow. Well, earlier we spoke to travel guru Simon Calder, and he's warned that the price rise may be necessary, but he says it could see a drop in passenger numbers.
Once people start deciding, well, the price is simply too high, once they find alternative ways of travelling, or crucially, people who are lucky enough in their working lives not to need to commute every day, the revenue for the railway falls away. Yes, the strikes are dragging on, and we are going to see yet more industrial action from the 16th of March onwards. Members of the RMT union who say, we want a no-strings pay rise. And the government saying, you've had your best and final offer, you're not getting any more. And if you want to go on strike, well, that, of course, is your right, but it's not going to do you any good. So once again, we're going into the another round of strikes, taking us all the way up to April Fool's Day. And indeed, many passengers will be feeling increasingly foolish if they rely on the railways. It's an absolute mess.
That's travel expert Simon Calder and friend of the programme. I'll just bring another view. Jenny says, if we're supposed to get out of our cars, then public transport should be cheap, like other European countries. It's a point, isn't it? Instead, we're going the other direction.
Yeah, but does that mean it has to be subsidised more by government? Don't know. I don't know how they do it in foreign. I don't know how they fund it all in different countries. This is a problem.
Certainly a lot cheaper, isn't it? Very interesting. GBNews at gbnews.uk. Keep those views coming in.
Let's bring you up to date with some of the other stories. At 8:14, the Duke of Sussex has defended his use of recreational drugs, saying some of them helped him mentally. In his memoir, he admitted to regular drug taking, including marijuana, whilst he lived in Kensington Palace. Yesterday, he spoke on a live stream with trauma expert Dr. Gabor Mate, who diagnosed him with attention deficit disorder.
More than 100 nations have completed a historic pact to protect the world's oceans. Legally binding High Seas Treaty aims to put 30% of seas into protected areas by 2030. Environmental groups say the agreement will help reverse marine losses and ensure sustainable development.
And venues across England and Wales will be open later for the King's coronation in May. Pubs, clubs and bars can service for an extra 2 hours between the 5th and 7th of May. The Home Secretary says it's so you can enjoy an extra pint or two. I see, this is where you went wrong on your first and second driving test.
What did I do?
Attempt. Because you've got to wait another 6 months or so delay, and now the driving examiners are going on strike. So if you're trying to pass your test, it's very problematic. Anyway, Jerry, morning Jerry, says, when I took my driving test, my instructor said, imagine the examiner is naked. I couldn't stop laughing during my test, but I passed first time.
Ah, that might work. Well, clearly it does, Jerry. Clearly it does. I must have missed a trick there. It did take me 3 times to pass my test. I barely passed the 3rd time, to be honest with you. I remember doing a reverse around a corner. I don't know if you still have to do that. We should ask him. But that was my manoeuvre that I had to do, and I scraped the corner the entire time. It was so awkward.
You're joking?
Yeah, we sat there in silence. So just hear the scrape, and I was like, oh, no, that must be an automatic fail. But he still passed me.
He's just like, I can't see this woman again.
No, it's
can't see her
get
again.
Rid of her.
Oh, here's one for you. Do you get asked questions on your... See, maybe you don't have to do that if you do, because there wasn't a theory test when I passed mine. So you got asked questions in the car, don't you? So here's one. Philip says, my driving examiner asked me to name 2 signs you would see on a country lane. I said, strawberries 50p a punnet and a dozen eggs for £1. I don't think he's being serious, Philip, are you? There you go. I
enjoyed that.
And Liz, I love this one from Liz, who says, my dad taught me on an old disused airfield and I had 3 lessons. I was 17 driving a Renault 4 with gears on the dashboard, and I really don't think the examiner knew what was happening. I nearly put him through the windscreen on my emergency stop. I probably passed because he was terrified by the experience.
Oh, dear.
We've all got a few horror stories, haven't we?
Yeah, and Carol says, 64 years ago, I took my driving test in Goring by Sea. When I turned up, I was trembling that morning. That's what we're talking about. It's traumatic, isn't it, taking your test? Well, I was told my examiner was ill, and instead, the local police examiner was taking his place. Well, imagine how I felt then. Yes, I did pass. It was a miracle. Well, pressure clearly worked in your favour there, Carol.
Yeah, it is.
I wouldn't have passed.
I don't know what it is about, because we all go through so much in life, don't we, all these little bits and bobs, but there's something about a driving test which is just... I don't know, maybe it's because we're younger, or tend to be younger when we do it, and it just seems like such a major, major thing. I had a lesson right before my test, and I was quite a decent little driver, at least I thought, and as we're driving to the test centre, some woman pushed a pram out of nowhere onto a zebra crossing. I mean, perhaps I should have seen it. And so, for the first time ever, my driving instructor had to slam on the brakes on his side. It's the only time it ever happened to me, and I was about 2 minutes away from the test centre.
Well, I think that's why it's so nerve-wracking. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's because you can't control everything. You could be a great driver and get out on the road, and then something can happen, or somebody can do something silly, and then it means that you fail your test. Yes, you are right again, Stephen.
Give over.
He's very good.
I'm getting ridiculed.
He's a man of the people.
I'm getting ridiculed by talking common sense.
He does talk common sense.
It's because I hate to say, because this will upset anyone who's south of about Manchester, but I am a northerner. And
Northerners are always right.
Cumbrians, northwest, we talk common sense. You know, where there's muck, there's brass and all that sort of thing. It's true. It's absolutely true. Anyway, not to upset anyone. Talking of cars, though, we're going to be talking fast cars.
Yeah.
And looking at the F1 opening race in Bahrain, bringing all the details, the juicy details, in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain.
Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
8:23, good morning to you. I have such trouble with this one. Did breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Every time we come on like this, she's like, you do this doll.
No, because this is what happens. If we don't have a little chat beforehand, neither of us know who's speaking.
But I don't get to decide. I'm just told what to do.
No, we have to communicate with each other, so I never thought
I never thought yes dear would be part of my lexicon, but it is now. Yes dear. Anyway, still to come later on in the show.
Yes, a police force is on the hunt for new recruits, but it's not who you may think. It's very cute, actually. Tune in at 20... Yeah, there you go. If you're watching on the telly, you'll understand why. 9:20, you're going to find out more.
If you've got any thoughts on what we're talking about today, whether it is lockdown, the lockdown files, whether it's about the train tickets, whether it's about driving tests, any of it, gbviews at gbnews.uk.
It's time for the sports now, isn't it, with our friend Aidan McGee, who's in the studio.
Morning to you both. Good to see you.
And you've got a story about your driving test you want to share
such
with
a
us.
dark day for me, actually. Yeah, I'd taken 45 lessons with BSM. They were the most expensive.
45?
Yeah, I just didn't want to do it. I really didn't.
Average.
My parents were, well above. My parents were like pushing me into it. And then on the test day in Gillingham in Kent, I was asked to take the next available left. And I did so, went into a multi-storey car park. Had to pay £1 to get out.
Is this true?
Yes, it's true. And I failed. Sure. I failed not because of that. I failed due to speeding. I was doing 38 and a 30 and undue hesitancy. And I passed my test 12 years later.
12 years
I left it 12 years, yeah. Yeah, it hurt me so much.
What, you that traumatised?
Yeah, I was, yeah. I was just traumatised by my parents pushing me to do my driving lessons, but I didn't really want to do it.
Why would you do 38 in a 30 zone on your driving test?
I don't know, I just got carried away. I was on the home straight and I didn't realise, of course, I'd already passed and already failed in the first 5 minutes, but subsequently when I looked at the sheet. But I guess I thought I was unassailable towards the end and I got my second cross because of that. But when I did pass, in 2007, I got 4 ticks, which I think technically qualifies you to be a driving instructor. I did make that point.
Yeah, I don't think it's as simple as that to be a driving instructor.
He didn't do it. He said it's possible, and I gave him my little plates. I said, do us a favour, Graham, find a bin for those.
Love it. Well, let's stick with the car theme, should we?
Yeah, why not?
Faster ones. I wouldn't put you in an F1 then.
No, certainly not. Not on my driving test, anyway.
No, not ever.
No.
Not ever. But Bahrain today.
Bahrain, yeah, exactly. We've seen practice, we've seen qualifying, we've seen Lewis Hamilton having a little bit of a whinge up because he's not happy with the spec of his car, the technical specification, that is. And this was rumbled through last season, really, and it's going into this season, and it just sets them off, himself and Mercedes, on a bad foot. But I want to bring in Rosanna Tennant, if I possibly can, the F1 journalist. Good morning to you, Rosanna. Welcome to GB News. I just want to ask you, first of all, about your hopes for the season, just because last season was a little bit of a read-through. It was a little bit tame compared to the drama we saw on the final day before that, the season before that.
Yes, it was a little bit, wasn't it? And good morning to you all. Yeah, 2023 promises to be quite spectacular, really. We are expecting a record-breaking season in that we have 23 events, which hopefully means we might see wheel-to-wheel racing throughout the entire season. But from yesterday's performance from Red Bull, yeah, they're looking pretty dominant. So are they uncatchable? Who knows?
Hamilton, then, have I got it right by saying that he's having a bit of a moan and some of these problems are kind of hanging over from last season?
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton not happy with his car, saying that they've started off on the back foot. I spoke to him yesterday and I said, was it about damage limitation? And he said, no, not at all. It's the first race of the season. So all is not lost for them. I just think they need to act quite quickly and remedy some of these technical problems that you mentioned. And they are supposedly bringing an upgrade to the car, but not until the 6th race, which is in May. So they've got a bit of time to have to deal with this car that neither Sir Lewis Hamilton nor George Russell really like.
But is this going to be quite late, though, isn't it, to deal with it? Is that going to be too late?
Yeah, it is leaving it a little late. Unfortunately, last year, Formula One brought in new rules and regulations, which meant that the teams had a budget cap to work towards. So it's not a case of just throwing money at the problem now, which perhaps Mercedes were able to do in the past. So they've kind of got to stick with it and try to just make tweaks where they can, which isn't great, of course, because they know how to win championships. We've seen them win 8 of them, but I'm not sure 2023 is going to be a year where they're fighting at the front.
I mean, Rosanna, it's Stephen here. It seems utterly ridiculous, frankly, that they've not got all this boxed off before the start of the season.
I'll tell them. I will pass that message on because I kind of agree. They've had a winter break to work on it. And let's face it, they knew this was a problem last season. So they had time to work on it. But as I say, it's just impossible. They can't just kind of push one whole design concept to the side and create a new one because they just can't spend money to do it. So there's also a rumour kind of in the paddock that perhaps it's engineering pride, that the engineers at Mercedes don't want to change it because they want to say, no, we came up with something that we believed in. We can make it work. But sooner or later, you've got to perhaps become a little humble and say, no, we got it wrong. And actually, the Red Bull design philosophy is the direction we should have gone in and perhaps we should now go in.
Rosanna, talk to me about Fernando Alonso. He's been racing in uncompetitive cars for some time now, but at the age of 41, he looks like he's having a bit of a resurgence, certainly in recent days.
Yeah, and he's looking great. He's looking really trim. The winter break has served him well. He's made this switch from the French team Alpine to Aston Martin. A lot of people questioning why he did it. A lot of people thinking it was just for the money. But actually, it's a good move. And you say he's 41. He's been sort of linked with terrible moves over the course of his career. He had obviously 2 world titles back in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. And since then, he just seems to have got it wrong. His management seemed to have put him in teams that aren't best placed to deliver him a car to fight for a championship or even for a win. Finally, it looks like he could have made the right decision to move to Aston Martin at the right time. Could you imagine it? Going up for his 3rd world title, perhaps fighting Max Verstappen, who's going for his 3rd world title as well. But the age gap between the two is huge. And that's what I think people are really excited about in Formula One. A little bit of a fairy tale ending, perhaps, to Fernando Alonso's career. But also, it means we might have 4 teams battling at the front for wins and for the championship.
Just finally, Rosanna, what about Aston Martin? I mean, it's quite galling from a Mercedes point of view, isn't it, that Aston have actually brought up to 50% of their car from Mercedes.
Yes, we spoke a lot about that in seasons gone by, where sort of like, was it just a pink Mercedes? They had a pink car back in those days. Now they sort of switched to the green, the Aston Martin green, and they've actually got a bit more of the Red Bull philosophy in the Aston Martin car this year. Aston Martin, they're sort of led by Lawrence Stroll, a successful businessman, very wealthy businessman. He wants to win. I don't think he goes into any business venture without that mindset. He's brought in the best people from the paddock. He's taken staff from Red Bull. Before that, he'd even taken staff from Mercedes. And it's paying dividends. So, congrats to Lawrence Stroll. Congrats to the Aston Martin team who've put together a challenger for 2023. Can they stay at the top? I'm not sure. We know that Mercedes are very good at in-season development. We haven't seen Aston Martin do the same yet, but maybe 2023 is their year.
Rosanna, thanks very much indeed for joining us on GB News this morning. We'll probably hear from you throughout the season, I would have thought, but we wish you a good campaign and hope you enjoy it as well. And who knows, Lewis Hamilton may well sort out those problems. You're a bit of a car man, aren't you?
What a job that must be, though, following all that round. It must be a bit tiring, actually, in a sense. You're just flying here, there and everywhere, but I just love it.
I know. I knew a guy who did it at Sky.
Yeah.
Really good. He had a really good time. He's been doing it for 12 years. He's had to reinvent his coverage every race, which was difficult to do, but not impossible.
No. What's happening with the football today?
Today we've got Liverpool versus Manchester United, probably the standout domestic fixture of the season, second one. What a difference a year makes. I remember United going to Anfield, really feeling sorry for themselves this time last year. There was all the stuff around Cristiano Ronaldo and the tragic death of his daughter, how well received he was at Anfield on the day. But nonetheless, United got absolutely thrashed on the day, 4-0. But they go there today looking completely different. I mean, they won the Carabao Cup last week. Their form is really good. They should have no reason to have any kind of inferiority complex against Liverpool, which is the first time that's happened in a little bit of a while. So I think it'll be a decent game. I think it could be more important for Liverpool to win, because if they do, that pushes their chances of getting to the top four just that little bit further up the, in terms of possibility. But nonetheless, we've got Mo Salah as well, possibly going for Robbie Fowler's all-time Premier League record today. Just needs one more goal to overtake him, so that would be quite a good feather in his cap. Yeah. And then yesterday we saw Arsenal won. I did feel that it might be quite a decisive day yesterday. Didn't feel like it in terms of points, because both City and Arsenal won. United playing today, but Manchester City, they won against Newcastle. They were comfortable, but honestly, Arsenal had such a battle. They were 2-0 down. They were a goal down after 9.1 seconds. Second fastest goal in Premier League history. You couldn't get to the toilet that quickly from here. No. 9.1 seconds.
Get to the door, probably.
No, I saw a goal in 8 seconds at QPR when I was 9 years old, and I've never seen one as quickly since. But they came back from 2-0 down yesterday, and they scored in added time. Reece Nelson coming off the bench, and as I say, it didn't affect the situation with points, but when you're 2-0 down at home to Bournemouth, shows on how unpredictable. Bournemouth are bottom of the league, going to a side who look as if they're going to win the Premier League, and they almost upset them. So when I was wittering on yesterday about all these easy fixtures Arsenal have got, that nearly came back to bite me yesterday.
Yeah,
weren't missed it.
Nearly did.
Missed it. No, I was. No, not really.
Man U, they're considering selling the club.
Well, yeah, they've been considering it for a while. I mean, there's been some games going on early, really, because there was a report last week that, well, maybe they're not. But then they've created a market. The Rain Group, who are selling it, the merchant bankers who are selling it in New York, they sold Chelsea last year as well. They've created a market. They've got Sir James Radcliffe in the door from Ineos. He's laid his cards on the table. The Qatar bid has come through as well. Rumours of a bid from America. Thoughts that maybe David Beckham could be involved in that, but I just don't know, because I think when it's ownership, you don't know who you're dealing with sometimes. Ownership's judged over a 10, 15-year period, and I think David Beckham, given his legacy at Man United and everything he's got on his plate at the moment with Inter Miami, might be quite reticent to get involved with that. But we'll know more in the next couple of weeks. Still, it will make money, there's no question about that. It's the most profitable franchise, football-wise, in the world, or historically has been anyway. Obviously, COVID has affected things in recent years. Yeah, but I think it could go for between 5 and 7 billion, I would have thought.
Ooh, you want to be able to chuck a couple of quid in that, don't you?
You do.
So I'll put
nice
a fiver
money,
in.
Isn't it? Nice
Worth a bit of money in 10 years.
Yeah.
Aidan, thanks very much indeed.
Good to see you this weekend.
Don't go anywhere, because coming up, we're going to be looking at just how tough life is for farmers, particularly in Northern Ireland. It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
You've been in touch over the trains, a lot on the trains. Yeah. But Cyril says, Stephen, come to visit the Far North Line in the Highlands. It runs as far as Wick, just short of the North Coastline. There are 4 return journeys a day from Inverness, and you will for certain love it.
And you want to go to Inverness, don't you? So Wick, I think you can add to the list.
Yeah, I do. Wick, I mean, it's quite a long way, but I've just seen there's a number of hotels popping up on the map already. The Nethercliff, the Caithness, McKay's, MacArthur House. I could stay in any of the Clacklin bed and breakfast. It all pops up on Google.
Cyril, you've started something now.
So who go up there, that'd be nice. Stay a couple of nights in Wick. Oh, lovely.
Oh, you've got it all planned out.
That sounds really good to me. It really appeals to me. Thanks, Cyril.
Peter's made a very good point, saying it's not just about train fares, is it? It costs £2,000 a year to park at a train station. It's all very expensive.
Yeah, that is a big issue. Look, let's have a look at the newspapers for you today. And the Sunday Times highlights reports of abducted Ukrainian children who never returned home after going on school trips. Thousands are missing, apparently.
The Observer's headline reads, he's gone full Trump. Tories are turning on Boris Johnson over Partygate after they call him and allies are desperate.
Sunday Express leads with the PM's promise to stop migrant boats with tough new measures. He's going to unveil those next week. this week, actually.
This week, yes. Well, it's time to go through the papers now. And joining us this morning is Ella Whelan and Asa Bennett. They've been with us all morning. And Ella, we're going to start with you because we didn't get to your Sue Gray's story in the early newspaper reviews. So let's go to that now, shall we? This is in the Mail.
Yes, so as Asa was talking about in the last hour, there is these kind of ongoing intrigue into how the appointment or the offer of the appointment from Keir Starmer came about with Sue Gray, her relationship with a Labour leader, potentially through her son, and the Mail goes into the fact that they go to football games together and all that kind of thing. And I think, but the Mail goes, I wanted to pick up on the Mail because it goes a little bit further and talks about the speculation that Sue Gray could be a spy or a plant called Redthroat, who is this civil servant who allegedly has leaked things like the news about the renovations to the flat number 10 and there was that moment and within Brexit negotiations where there was a huge amount of information leaked right at a crucial point, and so there is a suggestion in the Mail that perhaps she is behind something like that. They also point to the fact that she's been running appointments, the appointments team in the Cabinet Office, which means that she knows people's political affiliations. All of it, I must stress, speculation.
They must have had this legaled one way or another, mustn't they? Because, I mean, to say she's Redthroat...
Yes, it doesn't say, just to be very clear, it doesn't say that she is, but it's saying that there are people who are speculating that she might be, right. So that's the way to get around it. But it's just interesting because I think, like we were saying with the Matt Hancock text, WhatsApp messages revelations about how you know that things happen, but you never sort of see them in black and white. You know that there is a relationship between newspapers and politicians, but you never quite see it in as stark sort of evidence as the messages between George Osborne and Matt Hancock. I think there's a sort of similar flavour of something going on here, which is that we know that there has been questions about problems within the civil service. We know that there has been tensions between civil servants and politicians. The Mail details an email from Sue Gray in which she sort of voiced her opinion on the government's decision to block the Scottish Gender Recognition Reform Bill. And, things like that, I think, are worth noticing, that we are in a world of leaks, of intrigue, of spying, of bias, and all of that, I think, creates, for the people outside, GB News viewers and listeners watching, there is a sort of sense of cynicism about politics at the moment. And I think this kind of thing doesn't help, let's put it that way.
No, I don't think it does. What's going with in the Mail on Sunday, Asa? They're talking about pork wars.
Yes, it's very much the food and drink now in the headlines because it's all about free trade. We might be about to join the rather swankily named Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is basically a marketplace of 11 countries, 500 million people, of which include Canada and Mexico. And in exchange for us basically being able to import more of their, to sell more of our stuff, tariff-free trade, slashing tariffs so we can sell our goods over there much easier, we then will have to slash tariffs on their imports. And this includes Canadian, Mexican, pork, beef, meat. And obviously there'll be echoes you may be hearing about what happened when we had the Australia free trade deal, what happened with New Zealand. It's that classic tension of, you can well expect that Jamie Oliver, the National Farmers Union, will be kicking off later, because it is that thing of the more we import from abroad, the less we may be buying and eating at home. There's real concerns of that because it's about food security, and we need to develop our own food security here, don't we? Well, of course, you also need to have good, strong trading links to be able to buy in what you need when you do need it. Because we saw during COVID what happens...
Why can't we buy stuff that we don't have?
Buy stuff that we don't have?
Rather than just buy stuff that we do have, only slightly cheaper elsewhere.
Well, some things, in terms of food and drink, it's about the diversity, the breadth, to be able to source, the best of food the global markets can offer. And at the same point, I can make a patriotic idea that, we quite rightly can all agree that, British food and drink is the best, and so we should be proud to be able to sell even more of it abroad.
Yeah.
It can stand on its own 2 feet.
Shouldn't we be buying British and making an effort to do so?
Well, I think I stand by consumer choice, really, here, in that, obviously... goods that are made in Britain, red tractor labels and all the rest will proudly show the UK flag on their packs. And so consumers can make that informed decision. At the same time,
but is part of this... this is supermarkets, isn't it? Because it's about you know, if we go to the supermarkets and there's some pork that's, you know, 30% cheaper or 10% cheaper, whatever it is, than some other pork, then people are just going to go, well, I'll buy that one, it's cheaper, rather than actually thinking, well, that's Mexican and the other one is British.
Yeah, I don't think people go in with as much as Ace is right, you know, the kind of patriotic approach to this might be a good thing. I don't think people go into Tesco or wherever and with that mindset they go in thinking about the money that's in their purse. And, you know, my in-laws are farmers of cows and sheep, and they say that, you know, number one, the red tractor label is such an imposition and is, you know, a real pain for farmers and doesn't mean very much. But also, it's become increasingly difficult to be a small farmer in this country because of the onerous regulation, but also because of the cost of fertiliser, because of the, you know, so many of the sort of boxes that you have to tick. So in terms of food security, we also need to be looking at how we can make it easier and more affordable for people to grow our own here.
It's a perfect storm for farmers at the moment, isn't it?
Of course, and then you've got people like Jeremy Clarkson helping shine a light on what farmers are going through. So, you know, we're going to be... I'm sure this will be bubbling up later down the line.
I'm sure it will. Let's just have a quick look, 90 seconds, Ella, on the Sunday Times and why we should all be getting health checks at work.
Well, I saw this and I thought, great, I won't have to wait for 45 minutes in the queue at the doctor's, you know, trying to fight for an appointment. I'll get one at work. No, what's happening is that in order to keep people in work, the government is going to pay to have health checks that will amount to basically being weighed for your BMI and blood pressure. So forget it being awkward, kind of, you know, hiding your lunch in the cupboard at work. You might be weighed at the water cooler, and you know that's meant to keep us in work. I could rant about this for ages. It's a breach of privacy. Some people want to keep their health. The life of their healthcare private, and it's also a complete ridiculous. You know, BMI, body mass index, is something that, you know, teenage girls can tell you it's not accurate anymore. It's a real example of a back of a fag packet policy that isn't going to do very much. Why not get more doctors and get more doctors' appointments? How about focusing on that?
Well, because it's cheaper to buy a set of weighing scales and send it to the office.
And march everyone up at lunchtime.
I mean, no, I wouldn't be getting my vote, that one, I have to be honest. Lovely. We're out of time, sadly. It's been really good to see you both this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Now, food inflation and security, because we're just talking about farming, food inflation and security is, of course, very important, and we're talking about it a lot. And, of course, it really is affecting farmers right across the UK.
Well, GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has been talking to farmers that also have retail interests about how they're adapting to the future.
Well, your main costs are coming out of your butters and your milks and your flours and sugars, just right across the board. And unfortunately, in this last 6 months, we've seen a big price rise in everything.
Gareth Corrie explaining the problems around costs in the bakery sector. But Gareth has other business interests, and they're all linked to food production.
Well, we also do beef farming, dairy farming and butcher shops as well. And especially in the beef farming, it's getting very, very tight because of the cost of meal and labour costs and just the actual purchase price of the actual animal. It's very hard to make a living at it.
The food chain is a costly thing. It starts with the ground, the seed, all that have to be bought and then fed. And with rising interest rates, cash flows are being pushed.
It's an ever-growing issue. Do you know, the costs that are going into production, they just keep rising. Now, whether that is electricity, labour being a major one, fuel, fertiliser, all those things, they just keep creeping up. And that's, you know, across the board of food production.
Emily McGowan is the director of Millbank Farm Shop, and most of its produce is from her family's farm. She says direct retail lessens the risks and gives additional income.
Well, it's a tricky market. You know, you're relying on the weather, you're relying on the land, and it's, you know, that's farming. Now we have a farm shop now, so we're able to, you know, spread that risk and be able to supply the shop, not only other wholesalers.
As with most of the UK, produce prices to the farm gate are being kept low, and farms are now cutting back on larger retail productions.
As a business, we are slowing down and more or less stopping large-scale vegetable production because it's just not viable, unfortunately, anymore for us.
The importation of food is a risk, and will future generations take the gamble?
It's a very volatile market for supermarkets. Are the Spanish farmers going to plant the tomatoes and the peppers next year if they're not getting the money for the produce? Well, I'm a young farmer, and there are many other young farmers coming into the industry, which is very exciting for the industry, that there's a future. But there is only going to be a future if farmers get the right money for what we are producing.
Dougie Biddy, GB News. Well, you could see there that those are two very well-respected and well-known farming families here in Northern Ireland, and they're talking about the high input costs that are going into farms. Emily McGowan very much saying they are concentrating on their own retail and their own wholesaling and staying away from supermarket prices. And that's because on a world stage there is a pressure on farmers. The US Department of Agriculture just publishing its projected figures for this year, and they're not making good reading. They're saying there's going to be a collapse in income for farms, down 18.2% in the US. That's about $30.5 billion worldwide. And the US and Holland are two of the biggest exporters of dairy products. And of course, Holland, I was out there a couple of weeks ago, was getting pushed on methane, and they're trying to keep the cattle out of that on green issues. Now, here in Northern Ireland, across the UK, farmers in the dairy sector have received about 5 pence less a litre in the last few weeks. That will continue. If it does, farmers will stop producing their winter feed of silage and haylage, which will then cause a shortage in dairy by next year. And don't forget, most of our food has dairy produce in it, and it will force prices at the checkout back up. So really, the government needs to look at its food security. It needs to help farmers. It needs to put something in place that can very much control these costs, and supermarkets need to pay what they should be to the farm gate.
OK, Dougie, thanks very much indeed. And I know it's a perennial problem for farmers. I mean, but, you know, we're guilty of it. I mean, you know, we want cheap prices at the supermarket.
Yep, we do.
That means farmers aren't getting paid properly.
Yep, food security, lots of you getting in touch on that. Michael in Henley says self-sufficiency for the UK is now impossible. The population of the UK has almost doubled in my lifetime, and no one wants to talk about a possible limit. And Stephen Hastings says he's actually fed up of whinging and whining farmers. He said they complain all the time about everything. He thinks they make a very nice income. Well, I will say, I do know a farming family down in Sherborne in Dorset, and they were watching this morning, and they said, thank you so much for highlighting how difficult things are for us, because they are struggling with so many different factors at the moment.
I mean, look, some farmers do make plenty of money.
Yeah, but not all of them.
But no, I think most of them don't, and the work you have to put in is relentless. I mean, I'm from a farming background, so, you know, in a farming community, so you get to, you know, I got to see it all growing up. It's blooming tough, and I think it's getting tougher.
Hard work, isn't it?
On the rail fare increases, Duncan is going very hard line.
Oh.
Right? Duncan says, if you're moaning about the increases in the trains, you should get a job closer to home or move to where you work. Why is that so complicated for people? If only it were that easy, Duncan. I mean, come on, that's not really very fair, I wouldn't have thought. But there you go. Your thoughts are all welcome. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We've got the top stories heading your way straight after the weather.
Hello there, I'm Craig Snow, and here is your latest forecast from the Met Office. Well, as we go through the next few days, it's certainly set to turn a good deal colder across the UK, return of some overnight frost and also the risk of some ice and snow. Reason for the change is we finally start to say goodbye to this area of high pressure, and that allows us to drag in some very cold air from the Arctic. Not quite there just yet on Sunday, and for a lot of England and Wales we remain rather cloudy but largely dry. There will be a few showers around. For Scotland and Northern Ireland, a much brighter day here than on Saturday, with a mixture of sunny spells and a scattering of showers, and some of these showers potentially will be falling as sleet and snow across the high ground. Temperatures today generally ranging between 6 to 9 degrees, so that's very similar to what we saw on Saturday. And then going into the evening, we start to see the clearer skies across the north gradually sink their way southwards towards southern England. A few showers around, but more widely across the north, with this band of rain and hail snow sinking its way towards Scotland as we go through the course of Sunday evening. And behind it, as we go into the early hours of Monday morning, some very cold air moving into Scotland, widely seeing sleet and snow across the country with the risk of some ice too. To the south of it, a colder night then of late, risk of a patchy frost in a few spots, and then that will set us up for a mixture of sunny spells and a scattering of showers across the south on Monday. But more significantly across the north, turning colder as the day goes on, widely seeing showers across Scotland turn to sleet and snow, and eventually also across parts of northern England as we go into the afternoon. So do please be aware, if you are travelling across the northern half of the UK on Monday, that there could be some disruption due to snow and ice. And then going forward, as we move into Tuesday and Wednesday, very similar, most of us seeing some very cold conditions, risk of some snow, and not always across the north. We could just see some snow at times in the south too.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, I'm Michael Portillo. You can join me every Sunday on GB News. Remember to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel and to download the GB News app to stay up to date with the latest GB News content. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Annual rail fares increase across England and Wales, leaving thousands of passengers out of pocket.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Sunday, the 5th of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. These are your top stories.
Rail passengers in England and Wales are facing the largest hike in fares for more than a decade. The government say the rise of nearly 6% is below the rate of inflation and that they didn't want to add pressures on households. But what do you think of that?
The Prime Minister's reiterated plans to clamp down on the arrival of illegal migrants. He's told the Mail on Sunday, if you come here illegally, you will not be able to stay. New laws reportedly to be proposed this week.
And a police force in England has made an unusual request of new recruits for their canine unit. But how hard is it to retrain a dog for service? Stay with us to find out more.
I've got a very special studio guest on that one. Anything you want to talk about, we really do want to hear from you this last 30 minutes. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Now, from today, those of you in England and Wales who use the train will have to pay more for your ticket, as the government introduces the biggest annual price hike in more than a decade.
Yes, tickets including season and off-peak will increase 5.9% from today.
Now, the government's defended the rise because it's lower than it would have been ordinarily, and it isn't in line with inflation, but they say they've sort of shielded us from some of those pressures because of all the issues with household costs and everything at the moment, but of course it's still a very big increase. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has more.
Please stand well clear of the edge of platform 3.
Rail fares are heading in one direction, up. A 5.9% increase awaits passengers buying tickets from today. It's the biggest rise in a decade. At a time when purses are being squeezed to pulp, it's a hard reality to swallow.
You kind of reconsider using an alternative such as like a bus or, like other different transport than getting on the train.
It does put me off a bit. I'd probably, since the existing price rises over the last 3 or 4 years, have already done that anyway.
Every single year it's gone up and this is the biggest increase, but now I think it's gone too far. It's getting too high.
The Department for Transport sets fares for a number of regulated tickets, including season and off-peak. A season ticket from Nottingham to London for 5 days costs over £10,000 a year. But from today, that ticket will rise by more than £600. Usually, fares go up by July's Retail Prices Index measure of inflation. Last year, it was 12.3%. The government says it's shielding passengers from the brunt of the costs by keeping the rise closer to 6%. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman said, "I understand it has been a difficult year and people are feeling the pinch, which is why, through the biggest ever government intervention, we capped the rise well below inflation and delayed it coming into force." It's been a rough time on the railways. From strikes to the pandemic, subsidies have kept trains running to the tune of £31 billion.
Well, no one likes prices going up for anything, and it's certainly no different when it comes to rail fares.
Mike Hewitson is head of policy at Transport Focus. The independent watchdog says passenger confidence is suffering.
It's hard for people to accept having to pay more if they're not getting more in return. Paying more for an unreliable service isn't good. So I think the important thing for the railways, if passengers are going to have to pay more, that they get a better service in return. And by that, I mean a service they can depend on.
While the fare cap only applies to some tickets, rail operators tend to follow the trend. When all prices seem high, hiding is wiser than standing out for the wrong reason. Will Hollis, GB News in Nottingham.
Now, keep your thoughts coming through on that. A lot of you just furious about it, to be perfectly honest. Though I think what you do have to bear in mind is a little bit of that ordinarily it would have been about 12%. So they have actually reduced the cost for us in one sense, even though it's going up. Doesn't really help, does it? I mean, it's a big issue. It's going to be a big political issue, I think, because with the trains are just going down the pan a little bit.
Yeah, more strike action to come as well.
Yeah, it's all very grim. Now, the Prime Minister's vowed to clamp down on migrants claiming asylum in the UK when they travel here across the Channel in small boats.
Now, if you remember, Rishi Sunak made 5 priorities for 2023, and stopping small boats was one of them. And there's reports now suggesting that new laws will be put forward this week in order to combat that issue.
Yeah, currently, if you arrive in the UK claiming asylum, then you can have your case heard. New laws, if they got through, would say, well, actually, you can't. If you come here illegally, then you're out, and you will never have the right to settle here. So it's a pretty hard line. Let's talk to the political commentator and journalist Mike Buckley. Morning to you, Mike. I mean, this is a hard line approach. It remains then, can the PM get it through the Commons? Will it go through the Lords? And then what problem is he going to have with the courts?
I really don't know whether he can get this through Parliament or not, whether through the Commons or through the Lords. I mean, the difficulty is that the UK is signed up to a number of international conventions which obligate us to offer asylum to anybody who comes here and asks it. So this is certainly elements of international agreements that we're signed up to, and I'm sure it's against existing UK law, although obviously it's up to the government to change UK law if it wants to. It's also questionable on moral grounds. If we want to be a nation that is a force for good in the world, we need to offer asylum to people in need. And one of the only ways that people can get here is by small boat crossings, simply because the government refuses to offer any other safe and legal routes for people to come here. But this is constantly referred to as illegal, and it isn't illegal. It's perfectly legal for somebody to come to the UK and claim asylum. There is nothing illegal about that at all. The government doesn't like it. It likes calling it illegal because it makes it sound like the asylum seekers are doing a bad thing. But they're not doing a bad thing at all. They're just trying to live their lives. What I think should happen is that the government should offer asylum to people, say, in northern France or Belgium. There should be assessment centres where people can go, put a claim in, and the government can then make an initial assessment and then give them safe travel to the UK if they deem it likely that they should be able to claim asylum. But the government has never shown any sign of doing that at all.
Is it not illegal just to land on our shores? I mean, surely that
if you're an asylum seeker.
If you want to, get a ferry over, if you want to, come in a conventional means, then perhaps. But just to get in a small boat and land on a beach in Kent, that's not legal, is it?
Well, it would be if you were coming to engage in criminal activity like smuggling or stealing something or abducting somebody else or, something like that. But these people are seeking asylum, and it is agreed under international law that anybody can do that. I can turn up in France and claim asylum if I want to. I'm not going to do that. But there's nothing in international law against people claiming asylum anywhere. And it's then up to the receiving state to have a system where those people's claims are reviewed. And it's then agreed, yes, this person is a genuine refugee, or no, they're not. And as we all know, our asylum system is a complete state because it's been underfunded and badly run. So we've got years' worth of people backed up. I mean, this is one of the reasons why the government is so worried about it, because there are so many people backed up in the system, sitting in the UK, unable to work, having to be taken care of. If we had a functioning asylum system that was well-staffed and properly run, these claims could be run much more quickly. People then integrated into our society if they're genuine refugees, or sent back to their country of origin if they're not. The government don't do themselves, they don't do the country any favour by not running the system properly.
And part of this is cracking down on the human trafficking gangs that are operating on the beaches of northern France and Belgium. 45,000 people crossed last year. And the central all of this is it is a dangerous journey, isn't it?
It is a dangerous journey, but as we all know, as you just said, ferries go back and forth, the Eurostar goes back and forth. There are safe ways for these people to come to the UK, but we refuse to give these people access. If they turned up at the ferry terminal, they'd be turned away because they don't have the right documentation. So the government really has three choices. It can leave the system as it is. They will continue to get small boats, whatever they do to domestic law. Or they can let people come here on a ferry or on the Eurostar, give them access so they can then come here and claim asylum, or give them a means to apply in Belgium, in France, somewhere else in Europe by opening a Home Office. And I'm sure that people in Northern Europe, the countries in Northern Europe, would be fine with that. It's possible that Rishi Sunak will discuss that. He's got a summit coming very soon with the French. It's possible he will discuss something like that. But you're right to point to the human traffickers who are just in this for money. They're not trying to help people. They, in the end, cause a lot of deaths. And it's that really that needs to stop. But the easiest ways would be let people on a ferry or open an office in northern France.
OK, Mike, good to get your perspective on that. Thanks very much indeed. It's going to be a topic of discussion, no doubt, well, I'm assuming, but I bet it will be, on the Camilla Tominey Show, which is live from Westminster at 9:30 this morning. Let's have a chat to the woman herself. Camilla, good morning to you. I suspect a lot of voters will not agree with Mike's thought there.
Yeah.
And actually, Rishi Sunak is tapped into the idea, isn't he, that this is a vote winner for him, however difficult it's going to be.
I mean, it is a vote winner. I think it's like one of the most important issues when it comes to the ballot box come 2024, because the perception is that a Tory government that's been in power for 12 years and made a lot of promises about controlling borders post-Brexit simply hasn't done that. It's almost made the border situation worse. That number that keeps on coming back to haunt them, 45,000 people arriving by boat last year, when it was just in the hundreds before the pandemic, is really damning. So I think he's got that commitment, hasn't he? We know, don't we, he's got that 5-point plan, and stop the boats is the 5th of those points. But actually, it's probably one of the most important.
And Camilla, I mean, the front page of the Mail today is a hard line. Rishi says, make no mistake, I'll deport Channel migrants. But we've heard this rhetoric before, haven't we, with the Rwanda plan, and it got stumped. Fierce opposition from campaigners and legal interventions as well. So do you think it will get through the House, and do you think it will get through the courts?
Well, it'll certainly get through with support from the Tory party. What's interesting about it is the fact that we've had two now pretty hardline Home Secretaries, haven't we, in Priti Patel, who certainly wasn't, you know, loose or shy on her rhetoric around migration. She's the one who came up with the Rwanda plan. And then Suella Braverman, who, again, is considered to be pretty right-wing and is obviously a hate figure among the left because she doesn't take any prisoners on migration either. By comparison, Rishi Sunak seems quite moderate on the issue, and at the same time, he seems to be staking his premiership on moving the dial on it. It's that important, and I think after the Brexit deal, he's trying to kind of reaffirm his Thatcherite colours. People have said, well, if he's a Thatcherite, he's making a good job of disguising it, not least with a budget coming that we think will keep taxes high. So in this respect, he's got to look tough. He'll want to be the Prime Minister, especially with Boris Johnson, as ever, in the background, you know, champing at the bit to get some sort of political comeback. He'll be wanting to be the Prime Minister that delivers. That's the message behind everything that's going on at Number 10. I was in there the other week, and his spokesman was saying to me, you know, we just want to give the public deliverables. We don't want to make promises that we can't keep. I think that's probably a reference back to Johnson's era. So we want to be able to say, look, we can do this. So this legislation this week, I mean, I would suggest that his premiership is pivotal on its success, to be perfectly honest.
Can anything happen? Because what's been interesting is European Commission on Human Rights, right? And the indication has been that Rishi Sunak has not necessarily wanted to pull us out of the ECHR. For this to get anywhere with the courts here and the challenges it would face, we've got to be properly out of the ECJ and ECHR, haven't we?
Yeah, and I don't think Rishi Sunak wants to go that far. If you speak to Tories like David Davis and IDS, they talk about how the Tories were able to manipulate the decision-making around prisoner voting. That didn't require us to leave the ECHR, but it required us to do a little bit of legal chicanery to make sure that our laws took primacy over the EU's. And I think that's going to continue to be the case when it comes to this issue. I think there are some Conservatives, moderate Conservatives, who balk at the idea of leaving the ECHR, even though you imagine that the Home Secretary is very much behind that idea. I also think GB viewers do understand that it is very, very difficult to make government policy when you've got constantly human rights lawyers and others trying to thwart it at any given opportunity. That's the frustration. Only the last week we had the controversy over that criminal that should have been deported. We had a load of people on the left championing his case and talking about his human rights, and then he went off and murdered somebody. I think cases like that are anathema to viewers who just want the situation solved. But I shall be asking these questions and others of my guests. So I've got Chris Heaton-Harris, the Northern Ireland Secretary, to come on. I'd like him to discuss whether the Brexit deal is exactly as he describes Rishi Sunak, because there's a bit of rhetoric in the papers that actually the EU is selling it on slightly softer terms to their people than Rishi Sunak's been selling it to the Brexiteers and his party. I'm also going to be speaking to Jonathan Ashworth, the Labour Shadow Work and Pension Secretary. Naturally, he wants to talk about how Labour are going to get people out of welfare into work.
I'm a little bit more interested in the moment as to Keir Starmer's relationship with Sue Gray. I'm going to be asking Mr Ashworth, when did they meet? How long have they known each other? And isn't it now interesting that it's emerged that Sue Gray's son is a Labour activist? That looks a bit sus. I'll also be speaking to Jake Berry, who, as you both know, is a key Boris Johnson champion, and I'll be asking him, is he becoming a bit Trumpian in his quest to try and get this privileged committee cancelled on the basis of Sue Gray's appointment? And on the back of the lockdown files, as a Telegraph journalist, you can probably understand it's been a busy week at the newspaper, but I'm going to be speaking to Professor Carol Sikora, who is a leading cancer specialist, about what he makes of Matt Hancock's performance as Health Secretary.
OK, Camilla, lots to get stuck into. We'll see you at 9:30. Thank you.
Now, coming up, would you give up your puppy to work for the police? Find more about this after the break.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Now, at 9:19, Lancashire police have come under fire for asking us if we're willing to give up our dogs for them to have them.
Yeah, The public have responded, as you might have thought, telling officers to go and get their own. But how difficult is it to retrain a dog for active police service? You might be able to hear our next guest. This is James Mason, a volunteer with Spaniel Aid UK, and his super pooch, Teddy, who's on the table for us. There's Teddy, the star of the show.
Look, first and foremost, we've got to say, what do you make of this as a policy? Give up your dog so we can have them as a police dog.
Well, I mean, obviously I saw the tweet. We're at Spaniel Aid. We're getting so many surrender requests on a monthly basis.
Some people just can't cope.
Yeah, it's not necessarily sometimes they can't cope. It's cost of living crisis, having to work longer hours, not being able to give the dog the attention it needs.
Yeah, and do Spaniels make good police dogs?
They do, yeah, absolutely. Make incredible police dogs.
Doing what sort of work then? Is that a sniffer?
So, yeah, sniffing for drugs, explosives, SIM cards, money, things like that. Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of traits do they need to be a good police dog?
I think, well, the Spaniels generally have a really good nose on them anyway. They're quite a unique breed. But yeah, it's having that scent.
Why are they a unique breed in that sense?
So I think with Spaniels, they're not necessarily easy dogs. All of them. I mean, Teddy's a fairly easy dog because he's a show variety
he's
spaniel.
Stunning.
But there's a working variety as well. Which can be harder work.
Yeah, I think Teddy's trying to get involved in the interview, isn't he? You're just having a chat, aren't you, Teddy? And Teddy is being trained right now, we understand. How's that going?
Yeah, he's coming along really well. Work in progress with him.
How do you even start to train a dog up for the police service? Is it something that's quite gradual, or is it quite an intensive?
It's very intensive. We don't actually train them ourselves. But in terms of the training, yes, it's really intensive.
Yeah, and do some dogs not make it?
Yeah, so some dogs will fail an assessment. Yeah, absolutely.
We sort of wonder why the police are struggling, in Lancashire police, are struggling with a shortage, because why are they not, you know, if there are rescue centres and things where there are suitable dogs available, why just, you know, not use that as a resource and actually ask people to donate?
Yeah, so at Spaniel Aid UK we've got lots of contacts with various police forces throughout the country. And they're constantly on to us.
Because I mean, let's be honest, it'd be a good life for a dog, that, wouldn't it? I mean, well trained, well looked after, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good job.
Absolutely, and quite often they're not kennelled. They'll stay with the handler and go home with the handler. So.
Do they enjoy their work?
They do. Yeah. They love it. They love their work. Yeah,
so it's not cruel to have dogs working. So when I see dogs out and about at events, I'm always like, oh, I wish I could give you a cuddle, but you're not meant to, are you? You have to.
Yeah.
They're working dogs.
Yeah, so especially a working Cocker Spaniel. I mean, they live to work.
Yeah.
And quite often, if they're not worked, they will get bored, and then they'll start maybe misbehaving around the home. You know, start chewing things and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, it's. I mean, they're doing working dogs, whatever line of work, do an amazing thing. But you, Teddy, are just
he's so
melts my heart.
Oh, he's
absolutely
lovely.
gorgeous.
You're a good boy.
James, thank you for bringing him in.
No
it's been
problem
an absolute highlight. Really good to have you.
I feel totally distracted.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I'm very jealous. I'm going to have to play for cuddle.
That is it from us. Camilla Tomlin is here right after the break.
Hello there, I'm Craig Snow and here is your latest forecast from the Met Office. Well, as we go through the next few days, it's certainly set to turn a good deal colder across the UK, return of some overnight frost and also the risk of